open, ma'am? You cannot open the file?
Actually, it says one participant will share at that time. So we're going to stop my video for a while. And then I will try to see. But I only have...
Alright, please mute your microphone, students. Can I request the technical team to make Ma'am Harry a co-host? So that walang restrictions for Ma'am Harry to share her PowerPoint. Alright, sige, thank you so much, Fel. Mary, you are already a co-host, so I hope Ma'am share ka na po ng PowerPoint.
Yeah, actually on my screen it only has PowerPoint, the virtual background, portion of the screen, computer, audio, video, and content at the second camera. That's it.
Wala pong share screen, Ma'am.
I have the share screen, but I already clicked it, but I could not find the file. Even with Sir Era. Just for a moment if it's working.
Ma'am, we can see your screen already, ma'am.
Yeah, yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's pray that it will be open.
Ma'am, we can see now the slides po.
Oh, yes. Okay. Just for a moment. I'm gonna turn it off first. Sir Erap is suggesting that we will be using another word.
Okay po, ma'am.
Just for a while. Yes. Okay, there. It's clear now?
Yes, ma'am. We can see now the presentation.
Okay, so this is now why lesson plan. Diba? So let's ask ourselves, why are we the ones who have to, is the verb suffer the right term in writing the lesson plan? Why is that term? So from the term in itself is plan, a plan for your lesson. So it cannot be denied that we have to do that every day. Okay. Now, the overarching goal of lesson planning is to make learning more impactful for students. So let us bear in mind that when we talk about lessons, the center of our lesson would be our learners or the students. Before, actually I'm a graduate and a product of more of the book-centered curriculum, whereas for each year, teachers are required to actually finish the book from cover to cover. So the teacher does not have a choice but to speed up the discussion in order for them to accomplish the particular goal that was set for them by the institution or by the department. So as I have said, with all the improvements that we have, with all the changes that we have, the shift now, the learner will become the center of learning. So therefore, when we do everything, when we plan everything, all the activities, all the objectives, all the goals that we set for ourselves, when we are going to have our lesson, we always think about the learner. Okay, so they are the primary ingredient for the lesson planning. Okay, so building a plan is the process that could be equally creative and critical. Why creative? Creative is when you think of things that would make it interesting. How will I get to capture the attention of my learners? How am I going to make them interested here? How will I, aside from capturing, how can I hold their attention? And how will I prevent boredom inside the classroom? As well as critical. When we say critical, aside from being creative, you have to consider also the basics. Like, is it creative, but is it taking so much time? Is it creative and at the same time hitting the objective? Is it creative and at the same time really guiding my learners to grasp the content? So there should be a balance in lesson planning. It must be creative, it must be critical. So the teachers must incorporate, the term is a range of strategies to engage students, to assess the progress and support learning and understanding, and all the while thinking about the students on the receiving end. So you have, in one plan, you have to think of the strategy, you have to think of the assessment, and you have to think of all other activities that would support what they are learning. And at the same time, you will center what you know or what you want to have the learners learn. Okay. Planning lessons ahead of time means the teacher will enter the classroom each day fully prepared to teach new concepts and lead meaningful discussions instead of figuring out things as they go. So, without a lesson plan, students can quickly lose focus and teachers may be left scrambling thinking of what to do next. For sure, I know you students are very critical and you know very well, you are very sensitive to the classroom setup, and when you see that, you will say, sa manioy, marag wala man siya nakaplan, or sa manioy, marag, a teacher would have to think first, would have to really plan out so that the lesson flow would be very smooth. The students' attention can be captured as it has been said, and that the teacher would also not panic as to say, what's going to happen next? Now, wala man di sa ano, and so on. So, when there is a plan, you know what direction you're going to take. Now, bear in mind, there are instances that you might encounter issues, you might encounter situations inside the classroom that you, as teacher, has not planned about. So, when you have your blueprint, even if there is a situation, you can still go on with the lesson. Remember that, okay? So, I'll give you an example. How many times it has happened to me, Hannah? I'm doing my lesson and there comes a call up from the principal's office, or there is a visitor from the division office looking for me, and I have to, of course, talk to that particular visitor, or I have to talk to my administrator. So what am I going to do? As a teacher, if I have a plan, I can just go on with a particular part of the lesson. Let's say, for example, as I go already to the discussion, I can now move to the activity portion or to the application portion of the lesson and let the learners do the task first while I might be out of the classroom. And when I come back, then we can continue with the lesson. Given that I will be released or I will be finished with my business within the particular period. So that way, even if there is a visitor, or even if there is a distraction, or even if there is a situation that might arise during the time that you're having your lesson, you're still prepared and the learning of the students will not be cut off. Okay? So rather than, kasi wala kang lesson, diretso ka na lang, you were just bringing your book, you have not prepared anything, something to do, but you ask yourself, is there a learning out of that? May learning ba na nangyari na pinakopya mo na lang yung part ng libro? Pwede naman nilang basahin, diba? Meron naman silang mga libro. So, that's the thing. When you have a lesson plan, as I have said, when there are certain distractions, there are certain situations that might intervene in your class, then you can still go on with your lesson because you have prepared on what's going to happen with the flow of the lesson. So, you don't have to sacrifice the lesson and the learning of your students if they are needed somewhere else. Okay, so having a daily structure, kasi lesson planning is daily. So having a daily structure in place will help the teachers to what? First, approach each lesson with confidence. I know you would really experience this on the first few days or the first few meetings of your class if you're going to be a student teacher, or on the first few days of your class if you're already going to have your work. You would always have that particular fear. Hindi yan matatanggal talaga. You will get to be you will get to be nervous about your lessons, especially if you're going to meet your class on the first day. Now, if you will be observed, okay, by your administrator or your practice teacher, you will also feel that nervousness and that fear. But once you have your lesson plan, you can approach any lesson with confidence. Why? Because you have that plan. You will know, even if you're nervous, you might have that problem that you might forget, but you have that plan and you can just look at your plan and you will already be reminded of how you have or how will you have that particular lesson. So knowing that, meron kang blueprint, meron kang plan, so you will be more confident when you go to your class. Okay. Another advantage is that you can manage your time more effectively. Now, I was looking at, kasi I could recall when I was having lectures with lesson planning, I always tell my students, I try pala, not always, but I try to tell my students that how many minutes do you have to spend on your motivation? How many minutes do you have to spend on your activity or analysis? How many minutes you must spend or you can just spend on your abstraction? How many minutes will you spend on your application and of course for your evaluation? Why? Sometimes we get to be so creative that we wanted to have a lot of activities. With that, we forget to consider the time. If we're having a class, we only have 1 hour in our classes for the secondary schools. Meron pang time na 40 minutes lang. So how will you spend your time effectively inside the classroom? So if you're going to give activities na ano lang siya dapat, motivation lang siya or simple recall, and yet the activity is so complex that it has eaten a lot of the time inside the classroom, then you will not be able to finish the lesson per day. So you will extend that for tomorrow. So that the division of those particular lessons that you plan for the entire quarter, diba, nakakain. So when you have your lesson plan, you will already know na I only have to spend 5 minutes in a simple review. So, huwag mo nang pasobrahan yung planning mo. So, instead of having a game, you can just do a simple question and answer activity. Or there will be a time that you might say, I have a very long lecture. So, what am I going to do? I can cut this and then I can divide these topics into 2. I will have the first topic for today and second topic for tomorrow, but I will make sure that I need to finish discussing the first topic before I move on to the second one. So that students will really appreciate because the time that they are spending inside the classroom has actually been allotted properly. What usually is the problem with no time allotment? Minsan si teacher nauubos ang time sa lecture. Minsan si teacher nauubos ang time ng mga sabak, di ba? So we do not actually have that. Where wala na ito naging plano ng mga sabak ta or mag-remind ta or mag-lecture, mag-sermon ta sa atong mga bata kung naibili mo na diling maayo. But, you also have to consider that although this needs time management and classroom management, this needs time, pero kailangan siguro, I will just get a small portion, I will move to the lesson, and this particular child na may issue siguro, I have to have one, I will separate the time in talking to this child or to this learner. Bakit? That way also, dili, ma-appeal ang tanan. Diba? Minsan kasi, we have to admit, as a teacher, you will be triggered with something. Ma-appeal lagi ang tanan pag mag-start na ka og sermon sa mga bata. So, if you have your plan, you would always think na time pa. Issue man it. This is a situation. How will I deal with it right now? And how will I set it aside after? Because my time per class should be a time per class. Kung may isa or dalawang bata ang kailangan equal ng attention, then I will do that after. So I will not sacrifice the time of the 48 learners for this. Diba? So, you have that. When you have your daily planning. Okay. Next, you align learning with standards. We all have learning standards that are given to us. So, ito na yung mga competencies that are being called that we have to think. Before, in the old curriculum, we are just given topics. And it's up to us to, how shall I say? It's up to us to implement or to discuss those topics. Iba-iba. Tendency with that is these topics, iba-iba yung objective na ginawa ni Teacher 1, ni Teacher 2, from Teacher 3. Now, for this time, we are given competencies and standards. So, meaning to say, we are given the particular objectives, we are given the particular standards that we have to achieve. So, we have to follow that. Thereby, we are actually institutionalizing and that everywhere you go, let's say grade 10, first quarter, lesson 1, same ang objectives ng mga students sa Luzon, sa Visayas, at Mindanao that they have to achieve or the goals that are set for them because they are given that standard. As a planner of the lesson, very important that you align that learning with the standards that is set by the Department of Education or by the institution where you're working at. Okay. The fourth one, bring substitute teachers up to speed. So, some of you will get to experience substituting for the regular teachers pag may nagma-maternity leave or nagkakasakit and they have to have their personal leave or their sick leave. So, a substitute teacher must be called. Or even if kung ikaw, you will be asked by your co-teacher to sit in. So, hindi naman pwede mag-sit in ka at gumawa ka rin ng lesson mo. I unang-una, hindi ka naman talaga nila teacher and you will just be sitting there for about a day or two. So, if you will substitute for your co-teacher, then you will be guided with the lesson plan provided by the teacher from the previous lesson plans that she or he had. So, at least alam mo, dito na pala siya na portion. It's actually very, kumbaga, a very common thing, no? Diyan nakikita, dito pa sila mag-part kasi kami na dito na lesson. Siguro it would tell me. So the teacher would tell, kasi medyo slow sila sa ganito na topic, medyo slow sila sa ganyan. So, the lesson plan guides the teacher who will substitute for the regular teacher. So, hindi yung maupo na lang si teacher doon at magpapasulat or magpapakapi or bantayan lang yung baby. So, So you can also get to give time for the learners to learn, even if the teacher, the regular teacher is not around. You will just be substituting, or you will just be substituting for the teacher. Next, plan and perfect into the future. So daily lesson planning is actually demanding. Diba noon may sinasabi pag teacher ka, matagal makapag-asawa kasi until 12 midnight or 1 o'clock, gumagawa pa ng lesson plan at nag-check. Now, remember that when you do lesson plan, it's actually very true. When you do lesson planning, it takes investment of time and effort, and even your brain cells. Kailangan talagang gamitin mo yung brains mo in order for you to picture out what you want to happen to the class. Now, even after the lesson, even after natapos na, you have to gather feedback. You have to observe. You reflect on what has gone well with your class and what could have been better. Now, once a teacher would create a plan, that teacher would have a solid foundation of what's going to happen to the future lesson. Anong ibig sabihin? I know you're familiar with the idea of you assess. Bakit kailangan mag-assess ni teacher? You don't assess simply because end na kasi ng lesson, i-assess ko na. The purpose of that assessment is that whether you will move forward or you have to go backward and review the lesson. So, this particular lesson, the last portion of that is assessment or evaluation. So from the results of that particular activity in the evaluation, it will dictate, it will tell you, sandali, hindi pa yata na-master ng mga students ko ang content at itong objective that I wanted them to master. So rather than tomorrow, magsa-start ako ng bagong lesson, hindi pa nga na-master. So I will go back and reteach and try to look for another strategy that will help them understand better the lecture or the lesson or the topic that was discussed on that particular day. Kasi diba, what happens, it's sad to note, what happens is that minsan si teacher, hindi niya na naiisip yun, parang nawawala na siya, hindi niya naiisip yung mga learners niya. Meron siguro siyang kailangan gawin at kailangan ma-achieve na bagong lesson na naman for tomorrow, another lesson for tomorrow, another lesson for tomorrow, and hindi nila na-master. So what if that particular lesson is already a foundation for the next lesson? So hindi na nila naintindihan yung last lesson, dinagdagan pa ng another concept na mahihirapan na naman silang intindihin. So always remember that, as I have said on the first one, on the first opening introduction part, the learner is very important. So when you assess, when you plan your assessment, make sure that it will also tell you that are your learners ready for the next topic, or do they need to go back first in order for them to master the last topic? So that's the reason why that is how you plan for your future. Should I reteach or should I move to the new concept? And that's when you will start writing your lesson plan. Next, another reason why another advantage of having lesson plan is that you can document also your own progress. As a teacher, you will know that am I improving or am I not? Especially if you're going to be observed. So your lesson plan will document your progress. Even I would also add this, I'm really very appreciative of doing lesson plan kasi I believe, Sir X or Benji, you will be having your TOS making the next step. The lesson plan helps me with my TOS making. No? It's actually my document on how many days did I spend for this lesson. 4 days or 4 hours. I can write there on my TOS 4 hours. So it's very easy for me to identify the lessons that I had. It's very easy for me to write down the number of hours that I have spent in teaching, and at the same time to plan the assessment and the evaluation for my learners. So that is also another advantage. So that's my another take on when I say documenting my own progress. But in a way, if I look back in the previous lesson plans that I had written, should have done this. It's actually a review, and I can realize what should I have done better when I'm doing lesson plans. So, reviewing the lesson plan or doing your own lesson plan every day, you get to learn your progress as a teacher and the progress of your learners as well. Okay, so it even helps measure your professional performance. Totoo lang, no? So it's really very advantageous, especially kapag ikaw na i-observe or you will be doing a demonstration lesson. So you can actually make use of the previous lessons that you have written as references. And lastly, it keeps learning consistent. So keeping up with lesson learning can become a challenge if you're going to do it daily. So when you have a set of structure that you get to meet across every day or every lesson, it builds that particular structure in the class. So alam na ni teacher. I'll just give an example. I'm very much into group work. Whether face-to-face or nag-online classes ngayon, I'm into group work. So, when we were having lesson planning, when I was teaching fourth-year classes, I do introduce to them na, okay, class, is one of the strategies that I have developed on my own, that we will be having a group. At the beginning of the school year, I take their learning styles, I take their multi-intelligences test, I conduct 3 types of tests, and I base my grouping on that. Ginagawa ko sila ng grouping based on that. Now, this particular grouping is the group that they will have for the entire school year. Take note hindi lang isang activity, dalawang activity, isang quarter, half semester, for the whole year. So, when I would already be on, siguro actually a month after I start introducing the grouping strategy, when I would go to the class and I would tell them, okay, class, you go to your groups. So, alam na nila na saan sila pupunta, saan sila mauupo, ano yung kailangan gawin nila, and what is expected for them to come up. Kasi I used to have bulletin boards intended only for their outputs for that particular subject. So, they already know that after they do the discussion or their activity, they will have to put up their bulletin board or the outputs on the bulletin board. So, in that case, the learners are already consistent to their learning. There's already a structure for that. Alam na talaga nila. Even with my students who are actually having learning difficulties, if I'm going to say, okay, class, we will be having our group work. Alam na nila ang gagawin nila. Don't have actually leaders, but they already know that, tapos na ako mag-lead last time. Sino na naman ang sunod? So they do the selection. So that way, they already have the structure. No? Alam na nila. So it lessens my time in discussing instructions to them. So the only instruction that I'm going to give will be the mechanics of the activity that I have given them. But for the rest, it's already embedded. Kasi I am doing my lesson plan. And in that lesson plan, as I said, it's already in place there. So when you do that particular practice, it becomes consistent with the learners. And with that consistency, they already know the structure and they already know what to do when they're having a lesson. So with those, these are the advantages why you have to make lesson plans. Okay. Now, before I will continue, may I ask Sir Egg, are there any clarifications? Because I know it's actually really very long that we have to with this lesson planning. So, are there any clarifications or any questions that our audience or our learners would like to ask in terms of the advantages of having lesson plans inside the classroom?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. We have here one question in the chat space from Miss Nalangan. I would like to read her comment here or her question. We received comments from our teachers in our submitted LP that we make sure that our LP should have symmetry and congruency. Can you give us suggestions, ma'am, on what important considerations in making our lesson plan with elements of congruency and symmetry?
Okay. Actually, that's going to be a part of the elements of lesson plan. What makes a great lesson plan? But let's just talk about that. When you talk about congruency, it's more on the critical side, di ba? Yun ang sinabi ko, critical side. It has to be congruent. Your activity should be congruent with your objective. Then your assessment should be parallel to your objective. All of the things must be parallel to the objective. So that makes it congruent, no? When you say asymmetry, we are talking more about the balance that you have. Sometimes in the lesson plan, mas mataas yung time na ibinibigay mo for abstraction and or mas mahaba yung time na ibinibigay mo sa activity or it's so much. Tapos pagdating dun sa last portion, especially sa mga evaluation, magdali-dali na lang 5 minutes ang bata to answer. So that is actually, when we're talking about symmetry, there should also be balance to that. So as I have said, time management, it manages the time more effectively. So that's part of it. When you're planning, you should integrate also the planning for the time. So how many minutes must I leave for motivation or for the warm-up activity? How many? It's like that. So that would be more on symmetry, diba? Balancing. So how do you go about with the activities that you will be having in your class or in your lesson plan? So as I have said, I will be discussing more about that later. I will be able to tackle that in a while. Okay, but thank you for that very good question, and I'm really glad that you are actually thinking of what is congruency and what is symmetry. But these are the terms that we do not usually get to meet when we are writing a lesson plan kasi lesson planning is technical writing. Diba? Congruency, we can meet that, but parang symmetry medyo malayo-layo, no? It's more on the creative part kasi parang gano'n, no? So as I said, it's a very, very good question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that answer. I'm sure this topic will be elaborated later with as Ma'am Harry goes with the discussion. Right, students, are there any other question? Just feel free to write your question, ma'am.
We can still have one more. So we
Alright,
can have a little breather with the next topic.
Yes, ma'am. All right, so I would like to ask our students from the BSed English, are there any questions from your group students or from the social studies? You can ask actually questions that would really target your major. Of course, in relation to lesson planning. Activities perhaps, or the application. Are there any other question? What from the students from the BSed English? From the BEd students? Hello, students. I think, ma'am, parang overwhelmed pa sila sa discussion. Later perhaps, ma'am.
Yeah, so hindi pa masyadong controversial ang topic. Okay.
Yes. I think also, ma'am.
Actually, that's just an introduction. We're just talking about, the advantages pa man lang. So let's move on na lang siguro. So what makes a lesson plan effective? So I guess this is the portion with what our audience would be waiting for, no? Especially that they already came across lesson planning. Okay? So let's continue. Am I continuing the sharing?
You're still on your, ma'am? Yeah. You're on your next slide, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, there. So what makes a lesson as I already discussed, you always plan with your students in mind. Okay? So, diba? Kasi tayo as teachers, we would always know the lesson already. But, let's think of how do we have the learning across the classroom. What about learning in terms of the other part of the class? So, paano naman kaya ang mga students natin? So, when we think of a lesson or when we do plan our lessons, we always think of their abilities, their skills, their capability of adapting or sponging up the new concept. May mga times na talagang hindi makaya. May mga times na yung mga stress natin, napakadaling ma-confuse. I'll just give you the example. When we're talking about, when I do lesson planning for my grade 7 learners who are actually learning challenge, it's always, it's like a game or a puzzle to me na paano ko yung gagawin? Paano nila kukunin tong concept that I am giving them, that they will not be overwhelmed, they will not be confused, they will see the relevance of this in their daily lives. You know, like teaching English to learners who are having difficulties in reading, knowing that it's actually really a very big challenge. So, paano natin maipaparelate or short of really asking them to, you know, ang hirap talaga isipin if I'm going to think about it. And then, the teachers who are with me teaching them would often feel frustrated kasi the answers are already written on the board. Pag nag-quiz, nakasiro pa rin. It's like that. So, when I plan my lessons, I would always think of paano kaya nila ma-absorb ang topic na ibinibigay ko. So, let's say, for example, my topic is the rules in spelling. Pluralization rules na. Very basic pluralization rules. Kung may 5 rules ng pluralization, 1 week yung klase na yan kasi 1 lesson at a time or 1 rule at a time. I have to. Why? Because these are the type of learners who will get confused pag marami ng concept na ibinibigay sa kanila. So that's the first plan. Second, how will I assess? So minsan, they already get tired of listening to the teacher. They already get tired of the activity that they will have. So how will I assess and really see if they are learning? So, usually, ang nangyayari kasi kaya sila nasisiro is that, of course, pag nagsusulat sila ng answer, wrong spelling. Di ba pag high school, wrong spelling, wrong. So, isa na yan sa mechanics na kailangan mo isipin. Kapag ako'y nagbigay na activity, ang i-measure ko yung learning nila, muna tayo dun sa spelling. Kasi pag nag-concentrate ako sa spelling, 0 talaga yun. So, gawin natin true or false. So, mahirap din yun. Pag true, narurong spelling pa rin. So, dito ako magsa-start. So, draw a heart if it's true. Draw, ganon, it's false. Kasi I have learned it's easier for them to really grasp the concept if it's pictorial. So, gagamit ka ng pictures. So, mas madali. And then, when I do the assessment, nakalagay doon na the teacher will first give 10 numbers ang assessment. First three muna. Tapos, i-check muna namin. O, diba? Tapos, next 3. Tapos, i-check na naman namin. So, the plan would be there. But of course, I will not do that if my students would be the regular students or those who are fast learners. Syempre naman, they will get bored. So, if I'm going to have that particular lesson, let's say, for example, the basic rules in spelling or in pluralization, if I'm with the fast learners, most probably, ang 5 days na klase dito sa section na to would be only 1 day for the fast learners. So, with that, I have to make sure that my students would always be my best consideration. Now you might be asking, what if I have 5 classes? Different sila ng abilities. Diba? I think I already tackled that when we said that the last time. Plan with students in mind. You don't have to really change the entire lesson plan. You only have to adapt or change the activity according to the learner's abilities. Yun lang yun. May mga learners are very good with writing. There are learners who are very good with speaking. So, very mukha na alternate activity for them. So, that's part of your planning. You know, when you're doing your lesson plan, as I said, it's your blueprint. Ikaw naman talaga mag-i-implement yan. So, do not just make a one lesson plan good for everybody. That would be actually really, really good if you have students have the same abilities. Pare-pareho talaga sila ng abilidad. Pero whether you like it or not, kahit grade 10 yan sila or mga 4th year learners, may mga students, may mga klase talaga na iba yung kanilang performance, especially on this particular subject. So always plan that. Always integrate that. As I've said, the students will have to be the center of our learning. Okay? Second, keep the same overall structure every time. Okay. Sorry, parang na-double yata itong isang ano ko. Okay, anyways, I will be just checking that later on. Keep the same overall structure every time. This is where congruency and symmetry comes in. Okay. So when we say about symmetry, I actually looked at the meaning of this. Agreement in dimensions, due proportion, and arrangement. In everyday language, when we talk about symmetry, it refers to a set of harmonious and beautiful proportion and balance. So there is actually a balance in your lesson plan, a balance in your time, a balance in your activity. Even with the tasks that you have, there must be a balance. Sometimes now overuse na yung graded recitation sa isang araw, lahat individual graded recitation. It's possible to balance them by you can have small group activity for your activity, and on your analysis part, you can do your individual graded recitation or individual activity. For your abstraction, it could just be simple question and answer that's not graded. And for the last one, maybe you can come up with an application that could be, let's say, small group work. Let's say you have your main group done, 10 members in one group for your activity. Then on your application, you can have your triad or your pair work. Diba? There is a balance. There is the symmetry there. Aside from the fact that there should be congruency, again, that the activity must be related to your objective. Your abstraction must be related, of course, to your objective. All the things that you have to make must be in relation to the objective, because the objective is the goal that you have set for that particular day. So, as I have said, this is where congruency and symmetry comes in. The material and the delivery might change for each lesson, but the flow from the recap to the introduction of new concepts to reinforcement and even to conclusion should remain the same. This is what we're talking about. Aside from congruency, symmetry, we are also talking about consistency. The students will know what they will expect, how to build a good classroom habit, while the planning, of course, is more efficient. Diba? Less time consuming on the part of the teacher. Okay? Next, another characteristic of an effective lesson plan is having smart objectives. So therefore, you set smart objectives for each lesson. Forgive me ha, na-double siya, hindi ko na hit-code yung isa. You set smart objectives for each lesson. I know you already know what is SMART. SMART meaning specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based or time-bounded. Okay? So, what makes it specific? What is it that you want your learner to achieve? Ano bang gusto mong pagawa sa kanila? Are they supposed to write? Are they supposed to identify? Are they supposed to enumerate? I know that when you're writing objectives, you have always been told that there should be 3, diba? You have the ones for psychomotor, for cognitive, and for affective. But each of that must be smart. Okay? So always remember that. There are a lot of things that, there are a lot of mistakes that a writer of a lesson plan can commit when you're writing objectives. Number 1 is that the objectives are too many. Remember that you only have 1 hour to comply and fulfill those objectives. So make sure that you also choose what are those tendencies that you wanted to achieve. It should be measurable. Sige nga. Pag sinabi natin understand, is it measurable? Definitely not. How will you measure understand? How will you know that your learners are understanding the concept? It's not enough that we're going to say, class, do you understand? And they will say, yes, ma'am. Kasi sometimes, it's just an automatic response. Automatic na yun na response sa students na masasabing yes, ma'am. Especially kung malapit na recess time na at gutom na sila. So mag-yes, ma'am na lang talaga yan agad para makakain na sila. So, how do you make it measurable? You're going to say, you want them to write a 3-sentence paragraph. So you can measure. 1, if they are writing, that's very specific. Measurable is that, talagang nagsunod sila ng 3 sentences. So you can measure that way. It's actually really very simple. Diba? Or you can recite 1 part of the 1 line of the given poem and then they are supposed to expound. Oh, it's smart because it's specific, they will recite, and measurable kasi you're only asking for 1 particular line and then they will be expounding. So you can actually see that, you can measure that if they have actually done that. Another, it's attainable. Something that they can do. Okay? They can achieve. It's attainable. Kumbaga, pag nagpa-plan ka, can it be done or can be, diba, as I have said, you have to have time management integrated in your lesson planning. So if you're going to ask them to do that in the activity, would it fit or can they attain that within the 5 minutes or 10 minutes that you have set for them? So that's a particular thing that you have to remember. So minsan kasi pag nagbibigay ka lang ng activity, write an essay. So gaano kahaba? Ilang sentences? Anong content? So questionable sa bata, diba? If you're only going to say write an essay, it's actually specific because you're going to ask them to write. You can measure that, but is it actually very measurable in a way that what comprises that particular essay? Next is relevant. Ito yung parehas na sinasabi ko sa inyo sa instructional materials. Kapag si Winnie the Pooh at si Hello Kitty ay hindi importante, wag na natin ilagay sa ating instructional material. So, ito, if you're going to look, you're going to look at the images that I have here. They are integrated in a way na it gives a breather for the material. So, pero if you look at it, rather than simply just putting this and that, you will see that it's actually there's a connection because there are the pictures here or the images that are placed here are more connected to the lesson. Now, except for the last one, if you notice, nilagay ko yung picture ko doon kasi sabi nila, it's really very important that you also try to make it your intellectual properties. I choose to put my image rather than getting the image from the internet. Okay, now going back, it's the same thing. It should be relevant. A lot of times I have already encountered, this is what I would always ask my learners or my student teachers. Ang kanilang lesson ay like this. Ang kanilang activity ay energizer, pinazumba. time pa. Unsay relevance? Bakit nag-group ba sila? Diba? So, it should be something that must be related to your particular lesson. Okay? You might say, so dili na nag-8 na mag-unsa. Remember that it must be connected. There must be congruency with that. Hindi naman sinasabing, huwag ka magpasumba kasi hindi naman kailangan. No, it's not. Kung relevant ba siya sa lesson mo, why not? Okay. Another example. My lesson is about figures of speech. So, pinakanta ko sila ng Fireworks ni Katy Perry. Diba? So, kanta sila, kanta. They were asking me, music naman taan ni Ma'am Uy, nga naman. Diba? Ano nag-music naman daw, na English mo naman lesson. So, that was my activity for them. Why? Because the Fireworks, which is the song of Katy Perry, is actually filled with a lot of figures of speech. Ang daming simile, may mga metaphor, may mga, ang dami. So using that, that particular activity na ginawa ko, it's actually a relevant thing, no? May activity lang, very simple activity na to work up, kumanta sila. Diba? And the last one is, as I said, time-based or time-bounded. So time-bounded, meaning to say, if you have only about an hour, make sure that your lesson will be good for 1 hour. I could recall before, Ma'am Clarion, who is right now in the United States, so still teaching, exported na si Ma'am Clarion, she would tell me, kung hindi mo matapos ang lesson dito, pagkabukas, kailangan gumawa ka na naman ng lesson plan. And you have to know, you did not finish. At isulat mo bakit hindi mo natapos. O diba? Explain mo dyan. Kailangan may annotation. Bakit hindi mo natapos? Kasi when you're having your lesson plan, it's good for 1 hour. So, unless meron talagang mga distractions, interventions, kailangan matap mo yung lesson plan na yan. So, if ever na hindi mo naman siya natapos, then you have to come up with a new lesson plan with the last portion or with the portion that you were not able to finish. And it was actually very, kumbaga parang, hey, paano ko gagawin kung ang last portion ay evaluation na lang? So, paano ko gagawin na naman itong lesson plan na to? So, it's like that. So, that's the reason when you're planning, make sure na matapos mo talaga. So, what is the most important part of the lesson? Is it for them to grasp the concept or to learn to apply that particular concept? Kasi may mga lessons na mas kailangan mo matagal yung time for application kaysa sa lecture part. Meron naman talagang matagal ang analysis. Okay? So it's like that. But as I have said, this must be smart and very important is the time bound. Make sure na if you have an hour, then you put that within an hour, but do not squeeze all into that particular hour. So as I have said, you can be smart as well. Smart na talagang smart na pag alam mo, you can see that this particular concept will not really be enough for 1 day. So you can, as I have said, you can cut that. You can divide that into 2 or into 3 parts for your lessons. Walang bawal sa ganun. As long as you will be able to achieve the objectives that you have set for that particular day. Okay, now please bear in mind also, ang assignment, kasi assignment is supposed to be done at home, di ba? Or homework must be done at home. So, the homework, if you're going to include that in your lesson plan, it must also be very clear. So, part din yun, although hindi na siya mapapasok na, mas sabi mong time bound kasi nandun na sila sa bahay pag ginagawa yun. But it should still be very clear. Do not just simply read chapter like this. Again, is it specific? Yes. But is it measurable? Paano mo nalaman na binasa nila yun? Diba? Write your reaction. Saan nila isusulat? Is it specific? So it should be part of that. You're going to have your assignment. And make sure also that when you give your assignment, isulat mo, wag mong i-announce. Kasi yun ang nagiging mistake usually ni teacher na ina-announce lang niya. So, syempre, last 5 minutes of the lesson, so si student hindi niya yan magsusulat. So, when you write on the board and you let them copy, diba, you see your younger siblings or kayo na experience yan as a teacher sa elementary, pinapakopy talaga yung assignment right in your notebook. So, it should also be like that because even the assignment is relevant. But if the assignment is not really necessary, then maybe you can just simply say, prepare for the lesson and take the book tomorrow. It could be as simple as that. Ako, for me, that would be already enough, meaning to say they will be ready for the next topic for the next morning. Okay? Then number 4 is that you plan a variety of classroom activities. Kaya pala siya nagkamali. You plan a variety of classroom activities. So, okay. So, I have already given you the idea now. You can have a variety. You have group work, you can have big group work, you can have small group work, you can have individual work. Minsan, nauubos ang oras lang kapag nagpapagames. Diba? Sayang yung time. Although, pag nagre-review ka, magandang gamitin yung games. Have a variety of classroom activities. Why is that very important? Students would learn when they are engaged actively in class. Okay, when they get to interact with the content. However, the problem is, hindi kasi lahat, how should I term? Not everybody has, has that inclination to do group work. There are some students who prefer to work alone. There are some students who will be more confident if they have a partner. There are some students who are very comfortable when they are in big groups because they will not be discovered that they are not contributing anything. It's like that. So for you to have a balance and for you to see the participation of the students, you plan a variety of classroom activities, but not too much. Alam mo na yung limitations niyan. Diba? You as students have already encountered that at the end of the day, you have the tendency of at the end of the lesson, you get so tired na, maraman tagikulat because of the barrage of the activities that you have. So, again, papasok na naman si symmetry at papasok din naman si balance. Okay? Now, you leave room for discussion. Okay? So, this is very important. The lesson should not be only a one-way information from the teacher. They go nag-lecture for 1 hour. At the end of the hour, ingon ka, napagod ako, nahurot ako, tingog. Because all you did was just do a lecture. You leave room for the discussion so that the teacher, rather the student, can also have an input with the concepts that you're giving. You give them time for discussion about each day's learning. You can do that before the lesson. You can plan that, diba? You can probe them. You can ask them questions as a review. And at the same time, you can ask for questions. You set aside time to answer. And then you also set time also for them to create a dialogue inside the classroom. So, this way, when you're doing the discussion, from there, you can just actually really observe na whether they are learning or not. Okay? So, give them time. And then, that's actually one of the things that I have learned from Ma'am Kaligdan or Dr. Kaligdan, especially for abstraction. Kasi usually, when you do the abstraction part, it's usually the lecture part, or it automatically becomes the lecture part for the teacher. But I have learned from her, she said, you can actually do the question and answer for your abstraction. So that way, you will really have already an idea whether your learners are grasping the concept that you are teaching. And you will just inject what are the necessary points that you want to discuss. Okay? Next, gather and listen to feedback. So what did the students think of the activity? Diba? Usually, at the end of the activity, you would also say, okay, did you like the activity? What is the most important or what is the most exciting part of the activity, or what is it that did you like in the activity, or what is it that you did not like? Those are actually the feedbacks from your learners. You also observe, because that's a way for you to gather your feedback. What particular parts are they getting stuck? What could have been done better the next time, or how do you improve that? So ako, I usually do that simply by observing, or sometimes I would also actually ask the learners, what do you say about the lesson if we have enough time? I recall one particular class, mga fourth year yun. I was talking about, I finished already the lesson, and I had to give them an introduction for the next day for them to ready themselves na, ito na pala yung next topic namin. So after the quiz, the evaluation, okay naman yung kanilang results. So we need to say, I can go on to the next topic. So I was giving them an introduction, and I was giving examples. If I recall, my example was basic conception, but I already forgot what was it that I was talking about. I wasn't saying a bad thing about basic conception, but I was, as I've said, I was giving my introduction to the lesson for the next day. As I was leaving the class, so natapos na yung introduction, so nag-goodbye na ako. As I was leaving the class, naagi estudyante sa akong kilid. Pag-agi na ako, lalaki ko siya. Niyara siya sa ako. Sige, yaw. Sige, yaw. English, wao kasabot. Huh? So, I mean, it was not actually intentional na marinig ko siguro or ipadungog-dungog ko niya. But I was shocked, and I was, na-capture ako attention. So, gitawag na ako siya. Dungdung, alis. Nasuko ka kay example na ako, si Casey Concepcion. Siya, what ko kasabot sa imuhang istorya mampa. Wala daw niya na he was not able to grasp the preparation for the next lesson. How na nag-unaw siya, sige daw po yaw English. So I said, but the previous lesson you were able to understand. And he said, yes ma'am, I understood. Okay naman yung result ko sa quiz. Why did you say that? Ano part doon? Bakit ganun yung reaction mo? So you were talking too fast, and I was not familiar with what you were talking about. So actually, that way, no, though it might have been an affront, I will take that into a negative thing. I might have, masabaan ako siya, but it's not. It's actually a feedback, although it was not said properly. It was not a good way for feedbacking to your teacher or to the person concerned. But I guess I have listened, and the next day, I said, na-mention ko siya. Nag-ask ako sa kanya, so, is my pace okay with the lesson? It's okay, ma'am. So, it's like that. It's a way for you to adjust not only the lesson, but the way that you also give the lesson as well. So, maybe on that time, I was really thinking na, di ay akong gisulti, or maybe I was really just too excited or na-hyper na ako sa pag-discuss for the next lesson. So, it's part of that you have to remember that you're talking about the lesson planning, and part of the lesson planning is for you to implement the lesson plan. So if you were not able to also do that, then there's a room for improvement. Another one is keep an even pace. Ito pala si number 7. Keep an even pace. A good plan considers how much the time class needs to spend on each learning activity and how those activities will have to be spread out. Now, if you give too much information for your class, that would really very ineffective in a way that they do not have enough time to absorb the information that you're giving. Now, if it will be too slow, okay, if it's too slow, some of the parts, pag masyadong slow yung first portion mo, tendencies mas pasaraling mo sa last part. And then, there would also be, there would also be time for them to create mischief pag masyadong slow yung pag-implement ng lesson. Students may lose attention. So balance the time or the pace that you have. So not too fast and not too slow. And lastly, you leave room for flexibility. So this is very important. Sometimes, even with the most ironclad plan, talagang planado mo, there are unforeseen circumstances. Like maybe the students are too distracted. Like ako, I can see that pag yung mga students, may activity sila pagkahapon and they are really very excited or bothered sila kasi hindi pa sila nakapag-prepare. They cannot move on or they cannot participate in the class properly. So you will see that and ikaw din may activity ka rin nakaprepare ka na medyo mabigat. So you can adjust but it does not mean that you will sacrifice your lesson. You can adjust according to what is the mood of the learners for today or what is it that's the state of mind that we have. Remember that you have to still prioritize the learning objectives, the concepts, activities, and skills. So, you cannot just simply say na, I will not have the lesson kasi ano sila, sige mag-activity na lang kayo dyan, you prepare for your next class. It should also be that like that. Do not sacrifice your time or your class for that. But you need room for flexibility. Meaning to say, you still go on with your class, but you also adjust to the actual attitude or sa atmosphere na nasa classroom. So these are the things that would make a lesson plan effective. I repeat, number 7 should be you keep an even pace. So meaning to say well-balanced, not too slow or not too fast with your planning or the implementation of your lesson plan. Okay? So that's it on what makes a great lesson or what makes a lesson plan effective. So before I move on, are there questions?
All right. So thank you so much, ma'am, for that discussion. I would like to ask our students if there are questions from what Ma'am Harry had discussed. Yes, ma'am, we have here one question coming from si Makun.
Yes.
Yes, I would like to read the question, ma'am. What are the challenges that teachers usually face in preparing lesson plans? Can you give us tips, ma'am, on how we can prepare lesson plan in a way that is easier and accurate on their part?
Okay, so William, hello. Actually, the next part, I have your tips, no? Meron akong tips dyan, pero let's just talk about the challenges. It's really very heartening, Sir Egg, to know that our students are actually really thinking of, diba, ganito, thinking about thinking, and not just simply, accepting what's being said. Challenges. Ako as a teacher, when I started writing the lesson, pinakaunang challenge ko, pangit yung handwriting ko. Hindi ko na-appreciate, nakakainis. But aside from that, number 1 is that, when you plan, it's every day. And admittedly, you don't have the energy every day, all the time. Energetic kapag gumagawa ka ng lesson plan. Humans as we are, we get to be bothered with what's happening with our circumstances. Minsan may pinagdadaanan tayo, mga ganun, diba? Ang dami-daming challenges. Another is that we get to meet these particular topics that we do not like, but we don't have a choice kasi kailangan natin i-discuss. Ganon. Tapos, minsan din, you get to have you like this topic, but you have students who are not actually very lovable at that time. Sa totoo lang, talagang challenge yung mga classes. May mga ganon, di ba? We have bakit ganito sila? Parang ganon. Tapos, I know that I will be planning, pero I know that it will not be effective. May mga ganyan. So, ang dami-dami. Each one of you will face different challenges. And doon pa lang sa preparation, parang mabigat na when you're already looking into what's going to happen kasi when you're planning. So, if you get to encounter those challenges as a teacher, you really have to embrace that. This is what I've been telling my students yesterday when we are faced with one particular challenge. It's better for us to be proactive and constructive in the way that we deal with problems. So, as I have said, if you're tired, you're not in your right mind or frame of mind when you're writing, then you relax first. Take a deep breath, relax, and then if you find that you can already write, then write that. But I'm not saying that you write after 1 week kasi that's the time that you have actually decided na okay ka na. Give time for yourself to be prepared. Yun ang pinaka-importante. Kasi when you're writing that particular plan and you do not like it, you are not in a good condition upon writing it, when you get to revisit that later on, you will see so many flaws. Maraming mga things, pag ni-review mo, masasabi mo, ay, naku, I was really bothered when I was writing it down. And then, but if you are in a very good condition, actually, no, may mga times talaga that you will be in a very good condition. I would advise you to start writing lesson plans ahead of time. Kumbaga, magpunduhan na mo, di ba? That way, when you get, let's say for example, if you are ganado at this time, ganahan ka magsulat, so you get to finish one week lesson plan. So for today, if I can finish this one, pagka tomorrow, I will just review, so I'm already ready. It's like that. It's a matter of being practical. I got to experience that, but there was one summer to Shana, I had that bout of energy that I actually finished my entire year of lesson planning. Just imagine how manako isa ka tuig for one summer. Of course, I have all my reference, my past reference. But again, you get to visit and revisit that each day. Kasi even if you already have the plan, you can still adjust depending also on your students. Kasi when you're writing ahead, katulad ko, siguro in the summer, I have not met my students yet. So I don't know their abilities yet. So although I already have that particular preparation, pero for each day, I just revised and adapted that to the abilities of my learners. Now, tips on how you can prepare lesson plan in a way that is easier and accurate. The most practical tip that I can give you is practice writing it. Kasi it's only when you keep on practicing writing it and you have it checked, rechecked, critic, that's the only way that you will improve, and later on writing the lesson plan will become easier and would become accurate. You also make it simple in a way that it's quite easy for you to really follow. So, as I have said, I will be giving you on that. I'm just giving you the practical things. That's how I learned from it. That although at the beginning it's really quite challenging, no, kasi mag-isip ka talaga, but you keep on practicing it. You do it daily. You do it on a time that you know you really try to also enjoy writing it. So it becomes easier and it becomes more accurate, and you know you are already on your way to the improvement and development of your writing of a lesson. Okay, so is that okay, William? Was I able to satisfy your question?
I think so, ma'am. Message here. Thank you, daw, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you as well.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We have plenty of questions coming in, ma'am.
Yes,
I'm going
it's
to read
okay.
all of this. All right.
Yes, that's no problem.
All right.
We can address them right now.
Yes, ma'am.
Kasi later on, kung matatakel natin ngayon, at least konti na lang i-explain ko later.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Sige, ma'am. We have interesting questions here coming from the students. We have here from Ogso Georgie from BEd 4B. Good morning po, ma'am. What are the things to consider in making lesson plan that can address the needs of diverse learners or heterogeneous class?
That's also a very, very good question, no? Like, as I have already pointed out, when you're making a lesson plan, you consider the needs of your learners, and your learners are diverse. So as I have said, if you if you're making a lesson plan, addressing the needs of the learners, their diversity would have to come in the activities that you're planning for them. So it's good that when you're preparing in the activity portion, in the part of your procedure, doon yun na i-consider yung diverse needs nila. I used to before, when I'm doing a preparation for my lesson plan, I do the multi-intelligences, the MI. So when I do the plan, when I have the activities, I include there, what is it that my students are more of into writing, so I include an activity for them on that portion. They're very good in music, then I include also an activity for that portion, and so on and so forth. So that way, when I have that particular activity, and when I go to one class, and I would see that itong class na to, they're more on writing, they're more on the singing, and on the oral performers, then I will just give those particular activities. So when I go to the other class and I encounter another set of learners, then I also give them that particular kind of activity. So you can add or you can address their diversity through the activities that you will be planning for them. Okay, so you leave kumbaga, you leave room for that to address them. Like, diba, I'm sure you have encountered in your previous lessons wherein your teacher would be asking you to come up with an output, but it would depend on you. For those who would like to come up with a poem for as a response to this particular story, then you are allowed to do so. If you're a learner who's very good in drawing, then you can come up with your output that is being drawn. If you would like to, if you're a very good singer, so you choose a particular song that you think would make a good relation or would make a good background to the story. It's like that. So actually, in those simple ways, you're addressing the needs of your learners inside the classroom. So simple preparation for that, it would just really depend on how or what activities will you be planning for them. So for a heterogeneous class, it's actually, even if hetero yan, you will see, kahit sabihin pa natin hetero yan na klase, diverse pa rin yung kanilang intelligences. So it's still the same. So you really have to look on that in order for you to be able to have their needs. But ito lang talaga. Wag naman din all the time. I mean, very idealistic na sabihin natin niya siya all the time. So if you have one or two activities that you can do that to address their diversity, why not? And then you can also have a general activity for all. So that's actually how you can adjust your lesson plan. Okay?
Yes.
So, Georgie, is it okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Alright,
thank you.
Thank you so much, Georgie. Thank you also, Ma'am Harry, for that answer. I think also groupings, Ma'am,
Yes.
issues for diverse learners.
Yes, that's true, sir. And then also with your groupings, you can also ask them to choose on what is it that they would like to come up with. Kumbaga, bigyan mo rin sila ng choice, even kahit sa isang part lang ng lesson. They can have their own option also of doing that. Kasi actually, when you're asking them to do that, that's the time that you will realize whether they grasp the concept or not. And they're doing it in a manner or in a channel that they are comfortable doing it, diba? Parang napakahirap naman, diba? Sasabihin natin, pakantahin tayo, tapos yabang kanta. So, pasayawot na kahit kung kanang atong activity. And we can perform a particular dance if it's in relation to the topic. But again, going back to the relevance, kailangan balikan pa rin natin kung relevant to perform. But that way, as I have said, you will get to see the real scenario, whether they understand the concept that you have actually discussed with them. Diba? It's like that. I know Sir Egg and Sir Benji can really relate to that. No? You can really think about, okay?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, actually, the grouping strategy, I also learned that one from Ma'am Harry. Alright,
yes.
So ma'am, we still have many other questions here. So this is quite interesting, ma'am, no? How to make lesson plan for teachers or handling multi-grade classes. Is it necessary to make specific LP intended for specific grade level, or is it okay to prepare one LP for all the grade levels?
Actually, sir, I used to teach a multi-grade class before when I was in a private school. I was asked to handle one summer of multi-grade class kasi mga ano yun, special class na mag-stock. So I was asked to handle that. I handled sa isang klase, the first year and the second year, and the other classes in the third year and fourth year kasi konti lang yung learners na yun. For me to be fair to them, I really prepared one lesson plan for this and one lesson plan for one class and another lesson plan for one class, which is another grade level. Kasi unang-una, when you do multi-grading, it does not necessarily mean that you have the same competency. Diba? Hindi naman talaga siya magkasabay. So, you really have to come up with one lesson plan that is suited for this particular group or for this particular class or for this particular grade level. And you come up another one with another. Kasi, I guess that's the reason also that there are a lot of reasons why we have multi-grade. Number one is the school is small, the number of learners are there, only few. So you can lump the students in one class, but they're of different levels, as I have said. But it would not be fair if you just prepare one size fit all. So it would be good that you really have to make, you how should I say, you treat that, for me as a teacher, you treat them as separate classes just in one classroom. Yun. It's only a matter of how you divide your time, kung paano mo gagawin. Like, kung dito na, kung let's say, grade 2, sabihin pa natin, so si grade 2, mag-activity muna, si grade 1 muna yung bibigyan ko na, haharapin ko. So pagkatapos, si grade 1 mag-activity na naman, at dito na naman ako kay grade 2. So, it's like that. As I have said, you prepare one for each class to give justice to their learning. Kasi not all the time that the learning competence will be the same for both classes. Okay? So, I know elementary education na nag-ask nun, Sir Ed.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, yes, ma'am, from BEd 4B, si Basalo Abigail.
To know that you're already looking at the bigger picture that you might encounter in the future. Ako, as I have said, that's how I will advise you, coming from an experience that I used to have before. But again, it's from my perspective. So it would also be good that you also ask your future administrator as to what is expected of you. Malay natin, they might have a different thing. Kasi for each administrator in our school will have a different idea. Diba? In fact, ang isang school might be asking pag gumawa ka ng lesson plan na 4 A's, ang isa is 5 E's, ang isa is 3 I's. It's like that. It would still depend on your administrator. But if you're given the judgment call, as I have said, and I will be the one to decide, I would really prefer that I give justice and really plan, because we're talking about the learners. So kung learners ang pag-uusapan natin, kailangan talaga mag-develop tayo ng lesson plan intended for this particular group of learners and also for the other one. Okay?
Alright, thank you so much, Ma'am Harry, for that answer. And thank you also to Miss Abigail Basalo from BEd 4B for that question. I hope Ma'am Harry was able to answer your question. It really happens in reality, ma'am, di ba, multi-grade levels for teachers, especially for elementary teachers or grade levels. All right, so ma'am, we still have I think 3 more questions here. This one from from Miss Lizelle Jean Paculanang, BS Ed Mathematics. Is it okay, ma'am, if we do activities and discussion in math class that is not included in our lesson plan but is related to our topic?
Okay.
What's your
So
take on
that's
this?
actually remember that we are having the lesson plan as our blueprint. So remember that. So the reason why we're doing lesson plan is for us to be able to actually divide the time properly. As again, you have said, there's the balance, there's time management, and so on. Now, if you deviate from your plan, okay, I know for sure that you have your reason for that. It might be that you have already found that in that particular situation, may kailangan gawin and you're doing that. For me, you can do that. It's possible that you can make it. However, you consider also the time. Diba? Hindi ba nasa-sacrifice ang oras na related na tinan mo for your class? So maybe, I'm just looking into a scenario na ganito Maybe you already finished your discussion, you already finished your activity, hyper ang mga kids and they really are very interested with the lesson, and they mastered the lesson early at that particular time. Meron ka pang 15 minutes. So dinagdagan mo ng discussion, nagbigay ka ng activity. I guess it's not a problem because you're already done with your lesson. Now, if it just so happens na nag-veer away ka, bakit ka nag-veer away? So papasok dyan yung idea na flexible ka, dinagdagan mo kasi nakita mo, ito yung scenario ngayon. So nagdagdag ka ng activity. I guess that would not create a big problem unless all the other parts of your plan will have to be sacrificed. Just make sure na nagdagdag ka ng activity, nagdagdag ka ng discussion, pero you still have enough time for your assessment, for your evaluation. Hindi siya okay. So, again, diba, leave room for flexibility. It's not a problem. But not to the point, again, of sacrificing all the essential parts of your lesson plan. So, you can do that depending on ano yung situation mo. I have already given one example. Tapos na, pwede mo pang dagdagan, why not? Natapos mo na kasi yung lesson and you wanted to add more to that. Or, may times kasi, if I could look at that, minsan, ganito nangyayari. Nag-quiz ka, nag-games ka, nag-prepare ka ng isang game pala, ng isang game at 10 items lang yun. Na-excited man sila, na-excited ang mga bata. So, nag-decide ka na dagdagan mo pa ng another 10. So, you veered away with the plan. So, wala siyang problema. But again, if you do that, hindi ba masasacrifice yung iyong pagle-lecture? Hindi ba masasacrifice ang iyong application, ang iyong evaluation, and the rest of your plan? So, if that's okay, kung kaya mo pa rin ma-achieve, why not? But remember, as I have said, you know, these activities must be related to the objective. Ito yung sinasabi nating consistency. Ito bang activity mo, ito bang discussion mo ay nakalagay sa objective? Kasi ang objective mo ang dapat ma-achieve. Now, if it is only something that is, as I have said na, not included in your lesson plan, so hindi siya nakalagay sa objective, yun na lang i-advise ko sa iyo, ma'am, or ma'am Lizelle. Pwede mong gamitin yan, ang activities or discussion after na-achieve mo yung objectives for the day. Okay? So, pwede mo idagdag yan. Okay? So, it's a matter of placing it where. Okay? So, sana may ganyan. I want to add more.
Yes, thank you so much, Ma'am Harry, for that answer. I hope it's clear for Miss Lizelle. Alright? So, I would like to agree with Ma'am Harry na it should always be anchored on the objectives. But I would like to advise also our future educators, it would be better to stick on your lesson plan, especially if you are being observed for the sake of observation. Yes, ma'am. Alright. For the sake of observation, please stick to your lesson plan. Otherwise, no, mag-isa dyan mo og question sa observer. Alright? We still have questions here and there are really interesting questions, no? So, I would like to, of course, read this one later if magbalik na si Ma'am Harry. Students, you can still, no, write your questions in the chat space. If we still have time, we can accommodate your questions, no, or Ma'am Harry could answer your questions if we still have time. All right. So I hope you've learned, no, a lot from the discussion of Ma'am Harry, and we still have, I think, no, plenty of topics to be discussed. And we are getting technical already in the lesson planning. I could see this, I could see on your questions now, you're now getting also technical with your questions, like the objectives, the measurable, and if it's measurable and attainable, no? Questions like that. All right.
Okay. Sorry for that. There's a call from the division office. Okay. Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
No
it's
problem.
okay. I actually saw the question about how to make. Okay. There. Talking about making the objectives measurable and attainable. Right? So,
Yes,
remember that when you say measurable, it's something that you can really see that it's that's being performed, that's being done, that can be accomplished. Okay? So as I going back to that, if you're going to say understand, how will you measure that they understood? Paano mo malalaman yan? Or you realize, paano mo malalaman? How will you make it measurable? So if you're going to say, discuss the concept, diba, of such and such to show understanding of. So that way, kasi ginawa niya very specific na, pinadiscuss mo, measure mo yan. Kasi kapag hindi niya na-discuss, alam mo na, hindi niya naintindihan masyado yung concept. So in that way, you can already measure the depth or the grasp of that concept, of the knowledge of the learner. It should be attainable when they are able to do it. Diba? Na-perform nila yung task. Let's say, for example, identify the 7 major continents or the continents. So it's attainable. Kasi na-identify nila. It's measurable kasi na-identify nila. It's like that. Okay? So, actually, as I have said, it's one of the things that I'm planning to discuss with you on what makes, ang objectives kasi ang pinaka-trying na, part of the lesson plan. And then, yun ang balik-balik. Kasi yun talaga ang isipin mo always. How will I know that my learners are learning? So with that, you have to find evidences. So, that's the reason why it should be measurable, it should be attainable, it should be smart. So, again, going back, measurable, aside from the fact that you will see it can be performed. And it is performed during that specific time. So that makes it measurable and attainable. Write an essay. Write a 7-sentence essay. Yun lang, simple lang masyado. Is it measurable? Yes. Why is it measurable? I'll make the complete objective. Write a 7-sentence essay expressing the importance of filial relationships. Ganon. Balik ha. Write a 7-sentence essay showing the importance or the relevance of having filial relationships and so on. It's very specific. Ano gusto mo ipagawa? Right. Is it measurable? Yes. Why? They will come up with one essay and that essay will have 7 sentences. Is it attainable? Yes, because you have set a time for them. Kaya naman nilang magsulat ng 7 sentences in 15 minutes. Diba? It can be attained, it can be achieved within that particular time frame. So that makes it measurable and attainable. Paano hindi nagiging measurable? Katulad nung sinabi ko, understand. Ano pa? Think. Diba? Appreciate. Ang hirap i-measure nun. Paano niya i-appreciate? So, kailangan may ilalagay ka na dapat nilang gawin. Show appreciation for the for the parents. Show appreciation for our parents by writing a poem. So, ngayon, ma-measure mo na. Pwede niya maipakita yung appreciation niya through that poem. Diba? So, you measure that. It's really very specific and it can be attained. Hindi nga masyadong specific pa kasi poem lang very general. So, pwede mo pang dagdagan ng, kumbaga, measurement kung ilang lines ang gusto mong ipasulat. Mas ma-measure mo yan. Okay? Is it okay, Miss Lumakang?
Right? I think, ma'am, it was answered clearly. Nag-comment po si ma'am. Alright? Do we still have time, ma'am, for you to answer some questions? Yeah. I would like to
essentially, I would prefer this because, it only shows to me that our students are actually acquainted already with our topics and that they have these particular questions that they would really want to have practical answers. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
So,
all right, ma'am. Since you've mentioned earlier about the verb appreciate used for the affective domain, I would like to read this question coming from Ms. De Los Reyes. In relation also to the affective domain of the lesson objective. So she said here, affective domain is one of the major considerations or parts for lesson objectives. However, it is quite a challenge for us, for them, math majors, to integrate affective domain, especially if the topics are highly technical. What tips can you give us, ma'am, or what tips can you give them for them to improve their affective domain in their lesson objectives?
Okay. Personally speaking, I already told you I'm not very good with math. And I could not really appreciate it that much because maglibog pa ko sa less than or greater than doon sa totoo lang. Now, unless na siya peso signs, okay na sa ako speaking from my point of view as a teacher and as a person also, as I have said, who's not really very good with the subject, for affective part, for mathematics, I guess the one that you can really show, the one that you can anchor your affective objective would be on the appreciation or on the relevance of that particular concept to the daily life or to the daily living of the learners. I guess that's one. How will they be able to relate or show appreciation of this particular mathematical concept to their everyday activities? So I guess if you put it at that, on a certain portion paano niya, kasi affective na, iba, on how practicality of it, practicality of what they are learning. So if you can connect that to the everyday or daily living of the learners, then I guess that would be one very important gateway for the affective domain in writing your objectives for mathematics. Okay, because as I have, that's one of the key takeaways that was given to me by my teachers before, that when you're writing the affective objective, you relate it to the need of that particular learning for the daily activities. Yun ang kulang eh. Paano natin i-relate sa daily life natin? So, di ba? How does that become important for our daily life? So, that's how, for me as I have said, as a teacher, and how you can relate that. Kasi napakahirap talaga, sa totoo lang din, napakahirap i-relate. Mathematics is a really very specific the subject na very specific yan. So I guess that's the way that I can give as a tip for you. You can write it basing on how relevant would that be in the daily functions of the students.
Alright, so I hope Ms. Teros, your question has been answered by Mari. Kasi I think, ma'am, it's difficult for them parang to appreciate the value of X and Y,
Yes.
or to appreciate calculus among learners.
It's true. It's true. But again, as I have said, if you can relate that to the daily activities of the learners, then it would be easier for them to write the affective domain for the objectives. Okay. And it helps if we get to revisit Bloom's taxonomy, di ba?
Yes,
So
ma'am,
you can have your choice of the words that you can make use. But there's also one thing that I could recall when I was also learning to write the objectives. One of the tips that my teachers also gave me was that you can make use of, or you can write your affective domain or your affective objective, but you make sure also that there must be something that's related, or that must be an output to show that they are expressing that particular objective. So, i-relate mo daw sa isang output. That's the reason yun na nga, show appreciation by, or yun, may mga by. Isa din yun sa tip na ibinigay sa akin ng aking teachers before.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am, to make it also measurable, attainable.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. I have also come across, ma'am, with some lesson plans with at least parang only 2 learning objectives. Is it a good practice?
Come again? How many learning objectives? Nakamute ka, sir.
Sorry, ma'am. I have come across kasi, ma'am, sorry po, some lesson plans with only 2 objectives like cognitive and psychomotor. Is it a good practice to have that one?
Actually, sir, di ba? The objective is supposed to be the entire goal that you have set for 1 hour. So if you're just going to write the 2 objectives, I mean, hindi ba siya kulang for an hour?
Oh, yes,
Diba?
ma'am.
So you think about that. So when you're writing objectives, that's the reason why you are advised to have actually 3. So the 3 objectives would be good enough for that 1 hour lesson. So again, if you will just write 2, tapos for 1 hour, para bang hindi ba siya kulang? Kasi baka ma-achieve mo na yung dalawang objectives 30 minutes or 40 minutes within the time period. So what is it that you would like to add more to that? Diba? So this is goal setting when you're talking about objectives. These are the things that you want to achieve in order for you to have a direction. So kung dalawa lang yung gagawin mo, or even isa lang ang susulat mo, isa lang ang objective mo, may chances na yung isa na yan ay ma-achieve mo within 15 minutes. And if your learners would be that intelligent, especially kung sa high school, kaya nila ay nakuha na natin to. Kasi actually, di ba, advice tayo as teachers to discuss kung ano yung isa-set natin na goal for today. And even, kung pwede, isusulat mo sa board so that you can check, did we achieve this? Did we achieve that? Pag nalaman na ng bata na na-achieve na yun, isa or dalawa lang yung goal na na-achieve mo or sinet mo for that time, and you still have 20 minutes, do you think they will continue listening to you, or baka sabihin lang, tama na yun, okay na yun, diba? So it's also one of the reasons why 3 objectives are actually the minimum talaga yung 3 objectives na ibinibigay. But maybe the objective that you have encountered, it might also be very heavy. Diba? Yung objective ba yun ay how deep or how big, how broad is that particular objective that they really only had to have two. Baka naman sa dalawang objectives ay masyado rin pala talagang broad at mahirap siya ma-accomplish within that particular hour. Okay? So,
Yes, ma'am.
get to analyze, no?
Yes, ma'am. All right. Thank you so much, ma'am, for that insight. We have here another question, ma'am. I think this is very timely and relevant for our students, coming from Miss Rosalyn Ombon. Due to pandemic, we are unable to have face-to-face interactions, yet we are tasked to do virtual demo teaching sooner. Can you give us, ma'am, some ideas or strategies that we can utilize and incorporate to make the teaching learning process still interesting, meaningful, and effective even in today's challenging situations?
Okay. Let me just ask for a while. When you're talking about virtual demo teaching, you have students, you have learners.
I think pre-recorded, ma'am. I'm not so sure. Yes, student. Ayan, ma'am.
Okay, so actually, I can relate this into one of the trainings that I have. I'm training right now to be a NIAC accredited facilitator sa national level. Napakahirap kasi pag ikaw ay nagka-training as a facilitator, isa sa challenges na you will get to meet is that you talk to the air. Meaning to say, nagle-lecture ka. I am talking and I have an audience. So just imagine the challenge of you discussing something for adult learners tapos hangin yung kaharap mo. Diba? Tapos yes, am I right? That's a good answer. O, diba? Imagine namin lahat. We get to deal with that. And it's actually a part of the training that how do you handle that? During this time, it cannot be denied that you will have to do virtual demo teaching. Now, the very first thing, practically speaking, that when you're planning, always remember na practical students, imagine meron kang students. Diba? Kasi remember that your learning is centered on your learners, your students. So you have to imagine, sino ba itong mga learners mo? Let's say, for example, when you do your lesson plan, think, sandali, sino bang kaklasihan ko dito? Grade 7 learners. O, sige, kasi yun ang binigay sa akin na topic. Grade 7 learners. Ano ba to silang grade 7 learners? I'll think of a scenario. Practical ha? Isipin ko anong scenario na to. So, ang mga bata mo ay hetero, so regular classes, pero ang range ng kanilang grades ay 85 to 88. So, meaning to say, hindi siya, they're not actually slow in this particular subject. So, I can now base my strategies, my activities, the way that I would discuss the concept on those particular set of kids. Kasi nga, I'm already envisioning sino yung tuturuan ko. The same way as I have said na kami, when we are trained to talk or to deal with adult learners. So we have to train that we are given this particular topic. Tapos isipin namin, ang aming audience or ang aming listeners are new teachers, newly hired teachers. So we have to think of how we're going to do the strategies, the activities that we will be using in consonance with the abilities of the newly hired teachers. So if we're given a different scenario that this particular topic is for master teachers, so usually the master master teachers are in the institute or in DepEd for more than about 10 years, 7 to 10 years na yan. So, ibig sabihin talagang ano na sila, well-versed na sila. And they're really very fast. Marami na silang achievements. So, the strategies that I'm going to use are also for the master teachers, which will be different from those who are just newly hired teachers. So that way, when you already imagine the scenario or your students, it will dictate as to ang objectives, number 1. Number 2 will be your strategy. Diba? Number 3 will be your assessment. Ang usually na nagiging problema natin is that we do not envision who are we teaching. Hindi natin na-visualize agad sa tuturuan natin. So the very imagine as what you were given earlier is that who are your learners. So from there, you can craft your lesson plan based on that. And if you can achieve that, for sure, the teaching learning process will become very interesting. It would still be very effective. Now, I will give you further suggestion. Kung pwede lang sana, no? You can also suggest to your teacher siguro that you're going to do your virtual demo, and then you will be asking somebody to be your audience para mas madali on your part. Napakahirap talaga, sa totoo lang din na this is your first time, this is the first time that you will be meeting, tapos you will be doing your demonstration, tapos wala kang audience. Mahirap din talaga. So maybe you can ask for a suggestion that you can also do virtual demo teaching na with an audience, or you can also do your practice. Practicing mo rin. You can video yourself so that you will see how you can ano that. Kasi pag bini-video mo, nakaharap ka sa camera, para ka na rin may audience, no? Hindi lang nagsasalita. Diba? You get to do that. Another, you can do your practice by practicing it to the people in your household. Diba? So meron ka namang nanay, meron ka namang tatay dyan, or meron kang ka-board mates kung nag-board ka ba ngayon. You can do that. You can envision that. At practicean mo. Just remember, as I have said, taking into consideration what are the tips in order for you to make your lesson plan effective. Okay? That's the idea of it. Yun naman yun no? Challenging talaga, but I do hope that your baptism of fire for your demo teaching, you will get to have an audience. Iba talaga yung may audience kasi pag nagsasalita ka, although nakakatakot, baka may mag-questions, na di ba maraming questions ngayon, nakakatakot, pero it's actually easier because you get to become more human when you're teaching. Hindi ka nagiging robot pag nag-teach. Hindi scripted masyadong sinasabi. Diba? Mas mahirap talaga mag-imagine lang ng students. Students na mga bright or students na mga slow, napakahirap na burden. But as I have said, if you just get to envision them, then you can do good in your demo teaching. Yung iba nga, may nakita ako before na nag-demo teaching siya, tapos gumupit siya ng mga pictures sa harap na nilagay niya doon. Parang ang mga students niya, ilang kabuok, mga 5 or 1 man to, buta lang yung face niya. Kato na iyang i-imagine na kato iyahang mga students. So it was a very good, interesting na strategy din. So yun ang nilagay niya sa mind niya. Ito yung mga learners niya, ito yung kinaklasihan ko. So it was a very good way of doing the demo teaching. Okay? So I hope that, again, I'm praying that when you do your demo teaching, you'll be given a set of audience. And if not, then as I said, you can practice. Kasi it's only when you practice that you get to realize, you get to practice with real people and with real students. Kung pwede, no, may kinuha ka students, you get to see how interesting. Tapos pag nag-feedback na yung mga learners mo, yun, and see the effectiveness of your lesson plan. Diba? Feedback is very important. So kahit na yung nanay mo or tatay mo, pag nag-feedback yan, naintindihan nila yung lesson, makikita mo yun eh. So you will see that, ay, okay pala. Diba? So it's like that. But I hope, again, for a better circumstance for you, for all of you who are going to your practice teaching in the future. Okay? So, Sir Ed, nakoy question, di ba? Nang nilabot.
Yes, ma'am.
Also, monitoring is here.
Yes, ma'am.
There was a question from Sindrihas, Argentina. Naguna-una ko, Sir Ed. Sabi, asking if there's a need to reteach our lesson, what particular part of the LP should be revised to meet the lesson objectives? If you need to reteach your lesson, then the procedure must be revised. Kasi most probably the reason why you were not able to meet the lesson objectives is that the activities that were set for the implementation of the particular objectives or to attain the particular objectives were not actually suited to the learners at that time. So if you do need to revise, then you need to revise the procedure parts, the procedure of your lesson plan. Some procedure ay 4 na parts. So i-revise mo yun lahat. Okay? So, Sir Ek, marami pa ba?
I think that's it, ma'am. Yeah, I also read that question, ma'am. I missed out asking that one earlier. Anyways, I think some of the questions here, ma'am, have already been answered with your previous statements. So, I think we have no more questions now,
Okay.
ma'am.
But for sure, when I go on to the next topic, we will have another set of questions. So I do hope
Yes,
that
ma'am. Certainly.
I will get to answer a lot of those interesting questions. Actually, I miss this so much. I really miss having this kasi di ba, with ilang years na rin na walang ganito. So,
Yes, ma'am. Very interactive.
Yes, so the interaction. Okay, so with that, so I have given you the things that would make a lesson plan effective. So let me start with, okay, so there. So what does a good lesson plan look like? There. See? What does a good lesson plan look like? So let's start with the lesson objectives. Now, okay. Each lesson plan should start, of course, on what the students need to do or be able to do by the end of the class. So the lesson objectives must be action-oriented, just like here, describe the weather outside, identify the parts of a fraction, explain the different states of matter using water. Diba? You can see that they are action-oriented and at the same time, they are measurable. So you can measure them because the learners can describe, they can identify, they can explain. Really very specific. So it shows the essential needs of the class. The teacher can actually track the students' progress, showing that they have actually understood the concept when the students can perform this particular task in a certain time that is being set for them. So, if you have a good lesson plan that is having action-oriented objectives, then that would already be on your way to it looking good. Okay. Second, materials. What supplies are needed? It should be found there. List everything that you need to deliver. But please, if yung sinasabi ng aming teacher din before, the blackboard or the chalkboard is not the material. Chalk is actually basic, so hindi mo na kailangang dalahin. But there are lessons that would not require textbooks. But there are lessons that would. So what materials do you need in order for you to complete the lesson? Do you need textbooks? Do you need computers or tablets? Do you need handouts or worksheets? the globe, diba? In some materials, you are also really encouraged to place your references or your sources. That way, when other teachers would look into your lesson plan, it would be easy for them to get the same reference as you have. Or if you need to review your lesson, then it's very easy for you to have your references or to look back. Okay? So be very specific. Do not just simply write Manila paper. Diba? So, anong ibig sabihin ng Manila paper? May nakasulat? Wala. Kung kailangan gamitin pa ng mga bata, then you write blank sheets of Manila paper and pentel pen. Meaning to say that will be their activity materials. Or, kung ikaw mismo ka sa Manila paper, then you can write what? An instructional material or Manila paper with the drawing of the rain cycle. O, diba? So, very specific siya. Yun ang material na kailangan mo. Okay. Next, learning activities. Learning activities is the heart and the soul of the lesson plan. This is the step-by-step walkthrough of the lesson by itself. So, in this section, the teachers will break down the lesson into learning activities, the mechanisms in which they will deliver the lesson. And they will describe in the lesson plan what is going to happen in the classroom during each one. Okay? So, diba, if you're going to have your activity, what is the activity? So, students will be presented with strips of Manila paper with phrases written on them. Number 2, the students will be instructed to pair the strips of Manila paper to come up with a complete sentence. Oh, that's the activity using the material that is given. Okay, you pick the right activities for each lesson. You have to consider number 1, going back with number 1 here. How do they align with the learning objectives along standards or requirements that the students would need to meet? Whether is it meaningful and engaging, and the amount of time that you will use for each activity. So some activities would sometimes take up the bulk of learning time. So you have to integrate a variety of activities within a single lesson plan. Excuse me, for example, we can have read a poem as a class and discuss about its symbolism using critical thinking questions that students would answer aloud. Diba? So, they have one objective. So, you read a poem and then afterward, there will be a discussion that would follow. Or rather than simply, pero pwede mo you can break down. Read the poem aloud. Number 2, lead a discussion or discuss about like that. Or you can have create posters that explain the water cycle, diba? Or split the class into small group. Pero this is actually the activity in itself. Or they individually complete a worksheet to practice graphing linear equations. Then, they have to check in with the students to see if they have assistance or they need questions. So those are the learning activities, very specific. Pero if you're going to write that at the end of objectives, at the end of the 1-hour period, the students are expected to 1, read a poem as a class. Number 2, discuss about the symbolism of the poetry using critical thinking questions. That will be answered. Diba? So, the objective, again, should be aligned with the learning activities. The learning activities should be aligned with the objectives. So, that is what we call congruence. Okay. Next. Time requirements. Okay. I'm moving the Start by estimating how many minutes will be spent on each learning activity. I actually was looking at the number of minutes that that you have to spend for each activity. Like the activity part or that holds the warm-up part, that's usually 5 to 10 minutes. Then your analysis part would have to be about, again, 5 to 10 minutes. The abstraction would be 10 to 15 minutes. And then you have your application, that would be, again, 10 to 15 minutes. And then your evaluation, that would have to be 10 minutes maximum. So if you're going to add the number of minutes, it should come up with 1 hour. So it's adding also the preliminaries. So sa preliminaries, what is contained in the preliminaries? Prayer, your greetings, checking of attendance. So how many minutes you also spend for those preliminaries, which is actually should be a part of your routine, but not really part yan sa lesson ka na, hindi yan warm up, hindi yan kasali. So if you're going to spend, say, 5 minutes for activities or 10 minutes for activity, so preliminaries mo, nag-spend ka ng 5 minutes. 10 minutes for activity, that makes it 50 minutes. 10 minutes for analysis, 25 minutes. Abstraction is 15 minutes, that makes it 40 minutes. For your application, 10 minutes. And evaluation, 10 minutes. All in all, you have 1 hour. Diba? So, meaning to say, you have to really set a time. That's the reason, when you're planning, ito ba ang activity na to will be good for 10 minutes. Kung hindi makaya, anong dapat kong gawin? I-adjust ko ang activity or i-adjust ko ang time. So that should be part of your lesson plan. That would make it look good. Okay. Now, what are the related requirements? Teachers can include broader objectives that would extend beyond the single lesson, but to which the lesson would have to contribute. So again, parehas to the question kanina, di ba? Can we include activities or outputs or discussions that is not related? This is what you call now related requirements. You can add, you can put more, but just make sure that it's still part of the broader objective. Okay? So it helps to tie down learning with other requirements. In some cases, other schools or other school heads will require this, but not all administrators will do that. What are examples? Nandito siya, describe the overall structure of a story, including describing how beginning introduces the story and ending. Follow precisely a multi-step procedure when carrying out experiments or know the formula. Ito ha, tingnan nyo ha. The last portion, I know it's a little bit small. It says, know the formulas for the volumes of cone cylinders and spheres. Ano mo ma-measure kung knowing lang the formula? So, na-measure siya by saying the second part. Use them to solve real-world and mathematical problems. O, diba? So, ito siya, kung titingnan mo, hindi na nga siya masyadong mahirap kasi you will measure the knowledge of the learners if they can use them to solve mathematical problems. Okay? So those are related requirements. Next, there should be assessment. What's the difference between assessment and evaluation? Assessment is when you check for students' understanding into a lesson. Okay? But usually, assessment is not necessarily graded. Yun ang tatandaan natin na hindi necessarily graded. But assessment can also be graded just like the quiz, just like group presentations, just like in-class assignments. Or assessments can simply be like asking for your learners whether they understood or that particular concept. Like, sige, let's have a five sentence assessment o 5-sentence assessment. So, we'll do hot and cold. Ano ibig sabihin ng hot and cold? Allow me to share with you my screen, no, hot and cold. I'm doing this, as I've said, it does not necessarily have to be graded, but it's an assessment. I assess that if whether my students have already actually grasped the concept of the learning, and that would dictate whether I need to go back to the new lesson, or go back to the old lesson, or go to the new lesson. It's hot and cold, up and down, but yeah, thumbs up, thumbs down. So five sentence assessment. Okay, like for example, concept. All, let's say, sabihin natin, all regular nouns must end with S or ES informing their plurals. So, thumbs up, thumbs down. Ganun lang. So, students will do thumbs up. So, you can already see, makikita mo na, okay, so 40% of the class are making it wrong. Okay, parang may mali. So, yun na. Teka, 40% na to. Second question. You will see, thumbs up, thumbs down. Uy, nag-thumbs down. Parang naman yatang 50% sa kanila ang mali. So that way, you already assess. Teka, hindi pa na talaga nila nag-grasp ang assessment. So what happens is that you have to reteach kasi hindi naman nila nakuha ang concept na yun. Okay? So it's like that. Again, it does not necessarily have to be what do you call this? You really have to grade the assessment. But there are times that you see that your students are already ready for them to be graded. Okay. Then the next one, a lesson plan should also have the evaluation and reflection. So on this part, parang mahuhulog ang evaluation kasi itong assessment na to, number 6, it could be both assessment and evaluation for the learners. Now, on the last part, the evaluation and reflection on the part of the teacher. If you're going to look at the DepEd lesson plan that's being given, there is an evaluation part, the evaluation of the teacher and a reflection of the lesson plan. What worked well, what didn't, and why. What did the students need the most help with? What were the objectives or were the objectives met by the students? So that is your part. Evaluate and reflect on that particular lesson. So if all these seven parts are found in your lesson plan, for sure you will have a good lesson plan. Okay? So, now, yes. So I will still include, kasi you were asking for tips or things to see. So I have here planning with a sequence in mind. Ito na yun. It captures or it encapsulates the question that was asked on how will we make our lesson interesting, considering that we are going to do a demonstration, a virtual demo teaching with no audience. So this one will certainly help you. You plan with a sequence in mind. Of course, you start with an introduction. The introduction must have your purpose, the objective, the core concepts that you want your learners to learn. So even for the introduction, you make it interesting. Second is that there should be a foundational review. Kaya nga, di ba, kailangan mag-review tayo. What were the previous concepts that you have or what we call scaffolding? And then you can reinforce that with details later on. The next one, there should be brain activation. Why do you activate the brain? So it primes up the students for new learning or for new concepts. So kailangan i-activate mo muna sila. So you should connect from the previous lesson if it's possible or if there's a relation, you connect it by doing a review and that you activate their brains by introducing something before you give the new information. Now, if not, then you can find a foundational review that you can relate to other subjects. Wala namang problema yan. When in fact, in the lesson planning right now, they're actually looking for integration of other subjects. So you can provide a review using those other subjects to activate the learnings of the students. Then later, you can check understanding by giving questions or challenge the students with new information. And of course, after you have done that, you make a review of what you have come up from the introduction to the review to the activation, information, and checking for understanding. You review that before you go to your practice, an application of what they have learned, and lastly will be a conclusion to summarize the lesson. Now, these are the things, ito na. What makes a good and a bad lesson plan? Comparing a good and bad lesson plan. The good lesson plan versus a bad lesson plan. Okay. A good lesson plan uses a variety of activities to support the lesson objective and to keep the students engaged. While the bad lesson plan would just use one or two activities and would even use activities that are not even suited to the material. Okay. A good lesson plan would anchor it in relevant, real-life ways that students would experience. So, di ba, when students would experience real-life scenarios and relate that to their lessons, the learning is cemented. Okay. A bad lesson plan would not consider broader context and not even take the connection of that to everyday experiences of learners. Kumbaga, medyo box na siya. Kung English lang, ang topic will be grammar, punctuations lang, hindi na siya nako-connect sa everyday life. There's that certain limit, so it does not make an effective lesson plan. Okay. A good lesson plan includes a plan for assessment to measure the progress toward the lesson objective. The assessment should also be planned to relate to the objective of the lesson. So, if you say you wanted the students to write, diba? You wanted them to write an essay, so how would you assess whether they achieve that particular lesson objective? For a bad lesson plan will have no method. Wala talaga siyang method na paano mo i-check. It lacks method on that. Next, a good lesson plan would have as a self-reflection for teachers for self-improvement. A bad lesson plan is one and done plan. Kumbaga, pag tapos na. Bukas, iba na naman. Okay? No thinking of was the lesson effective or not. Okay. Next. Yon. Parang nauna pala to. A good lesson plan has a clear objective stated at the beginning to keep the learning activities focused. Not so good lesson plan would be only in one topic without even the learning objectives in mind for the students. The good lesson plan outlines the learning activities in a thoughtful flow. Meaning to say, what thoughtful flow? May mga activities na kung sunod-sunod ay nakakapagod. Pwede ba ang activity na masyadong active, ang sunod na activity, melo-melo naman ng konti, tapos ang sunod naman, it's like that. That's what we call a laundry list of activities with no particular order. Sige, nag-game na. O, sunod na game, sunod na game, sunod na game. It's like that. So, the flow of that is, sandali, saan napapunta tong lesson na to or game show lang ba tayo today? Okay. A good lesson plan is easy to scan and read for easy references during class. Remember that you are allowed to bring the lesson plan inside the classroom so that you will be guided as a teacher. A bad lesson plan or a not so good lesson plan is just a collection of paragraphs or bullet points without visual organization. Sometimes nakalagay pa siya sa index card na minsan nalilito ka rin kasi nililipat yung parts ng lesson plan, so minsan nadi-disarrange and nadi-disorganize. A good lesson plan would pair each activity with a time allocation, while a not so good lesson plan just the list of activities with no time allocation. Okay? So, this is the comparison of a good and a not so good lesson plan, which I know, of course, you can correct later on. So, why is a lesson plan very important? So we already have learned that it's good for us to provide the flow of the lesson, and at the same time, it helps in classroom management. So what is classroom management? Classroom management is how your classroom will run. Okay? How the structure of your classroom, how does it flow? So sometimes, even if you have already very good plans, but sometimes there are unforeseen circumstances that it could become thought-provoking and very much challenging. So the Wi-Fi will not work, tables don't work, your computer will not work, diba? Minsan hindi nagko-cooperate ang television or hindi nagko-cooperate yung equipment na gagamitin mo. So those are the things. But even if you have those things, when you're doing a lesson plan, meron kang, di ba, I already gave you the term flexibility. It does not work on this. If I would recall, we used to observe one teacher na ang i-prepare niya is television for the demonstration. But the television does not work. So nagpanic na siya. We were saying na, Ma'am, what's your plan B? So may plan B ka, dapat flexible ka. Okay. So classroom management is a combination of your skill and technique as a teacher to make sure that your class will flow properly. At the same time, they will reach their learning goals. So lesson planning plus classroom management is very important. So first, when you're doing lesson plan, envision the classroom environment. You map out the physical space. Ito bang activity ko, nagpag-grouping ako at first. Pagkatapos, ano mangyayari? Say, you group yourselves into 10. So nag-grouping sila, you stay together in a circle. Ang next activity mo ay lecture. What will they do? Will they go back to their proper seats or would they stay there? It's like that. Consider the traffic flow. Pag nag-submit ba sila ng paper, yung nasa likod makakasubmit ba? Or nagpa-contest ka, nagpaunahay ka o submit, paano naman yung nasa likod? Kaya ba nila ma-submit on time? Okay. You also map out your digital environment. You talk about your of course, planning mo sa nakaharap yung TV and all. Your classroom routine. What is the first thing that your students will do? Ito din sabi ko, routinary procedures. When they walk into the classroom, how do they go about with the next activity after the other? So when you already set the routine, it would be very easy for you to go on with your lesson plan. Okay? Now, classroom relationships. When you cannot control your students inside the classroom, for sure, they will create that behavior by influencing the others. I remember yung i-share ni Sir Egg last time na isa ka grupo na nagplano kita magpagawa. Imagine, and then if you cannot control katong pagpapalong mo, it will really affect the others. Not affect simply influence. The others will be affected kasi they will be distracted. So, the more positive a student would feel towards the teacher and the class, the more they would also be likely more positive towards the lesson. So, you have to build your classroom relationships. Okay? So, dito papasok yung mga games. You can lighten the mood. If I could recall one particular teacher, enjoy ko sa iya because I was following her vlogs before. Talking about the classroom environment, her classroom routine, her classroom relationships. Hindi masyadong applicable sa atin because the teacher was actually in the United States. And in the US, they stay inside their classroom. It's only the learners who get inside. And for every occasion, may mga pag may topic siya, literature yung klase niya. Yung klase niya is about, let's say for example, the Legends of Sleepy Hollow. So it's actually one American literature that's very interesting kasi may pagka-suspense to. So she designs her classroom into the environment of the setting of the story. So talagang dinesign niya yun. So naka-close ang door. Pagpasok ng mga students, they get to be transported in that classroom, in that story. So pagka next week na naman, iba na naman yung story niya. So iba na naman yung setup ng classroom. And the students are actually really very much interested. However, there are limitations kasi nga, number one, nandun sila sa loob ng classroom, kaya yung makapag-display sa classroom because they are provided. Number two, it's the learners who are going there. And number three, limited lang din yung number of learners nila. Maximum na yata sa kanila 30, sa atin 50. Okay. Next is instructional delivery. Teachers do not teach. They must learn to connect and communicate. They must learn to make the students feel included by having eye contact and include everyone in the question and answer session. So please remember that. It's really very important. We are not talking about how you pronounce, how good with your word choices. It's how you connect with your learners. And the last one is, of course, planning for the unexpected. According to Murphy, so si Murphy's law would say, anything can go wrong will go wrong. So when you're doing your planning, tapos gagamit ka ng technology, just expect, what if that technology will fail? So what will happen? So you include a just-in-case activity. In case dili mo work kaning akong laptop, unsay akong plan B. Prioritize learning activities that you can cut if you run out of time. So that's also a rule of flexibility. So there are learning activities na pwede mo siguro i-cut lang, just get the most important part in case that you will not have enough time. You also plan mini activities if you're still going to set up your equipment. And lastly, you share your agenda so that they can recover from the disruption. So if things happen wrong, maraming hindi ini-expect na dumaan or na-encounter ninyo, you share what you're going to do for that day so that the learners, even if they're also affected by the disruption, they will still set the goal for that day that we have to achieve this particular time. So there are things that are really very important that might be invisible but still very important in lesson planning. Kasi these are already included, especially in your procedure. That's the reason why I had to make this a part of the lecture for today. And with that, I will be closing this discussion. I do hope that there are questions that triggered you with this discussion that we had on the latter part. So, Sir Egg.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for that insights. All right, so let's ask our students now if there are questions or clarifications out from the discussion of Ma'am Harry. Yes, students, go ahead. Just feel free to type your questions in the chat space so that Ma'am Harry could address your concerns. Or would you like to ask for any tips? All right. Would you like to see some samples of lesson plan used by the Department of Education? Ma'am, I would like to ask, ano po yung the format of the lesson plan that is going to be utilized by the student? Is it 4 A's or the 5 E's?
Actually, Sir Egg, we are still advocating the use of the 4 A's lesson plan. Kaya lang, iba-iba pa rin yung term. That's the next talk that I'm going to give. I have prepared about 15 slides for that. What we are using right now is, again, 4 A's, pero iba-iba lang yung terms nila, no? Kung titingnan mo. I have also downloaded a video, pero later ko na lang ipapakita. Baka challenge na naman yan. So, diba? But this is the next part of the topic that I have. As I have said, I just prepared a short presentation going to the parts of the lesson plan, the elements of the lesson plan, and of course, a sample of a lesson plan. Nandito siya.
Oh, okay po, ma'am. I thought mag-end ka na kasi. Meron pa palang
I
ma'am.
just have a short preparation pa. I prepared something for the students to see. This is one of the things that I was, actually, as I had said, I already stepped late last night kasi nakapag-prepare na ako last week. The only problem was, there were a lot of things to cover and I was thinking of, if I'm going to discuss about this, kumbaga, magiging useful ba agad sa kanila? Knowing that when you do lesson planning, it's actually a skill and it should be an application. So I had to revise my lecture and I had to look for a very, kumbaga, an alternative presentation that I know in a way can also provide a foundation for our learners today. Okay?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much,
So,
ma'am. We have here one question po, ma'am, coming from Miss Guan. She's asking if do lesson objectives impacts the eagerness or interest of the students to listen in the class.
come again, sir.
She's asking about ano po, ma'am, the lesson objectives and
Yes.
its direct impact on the eagerness or interest of the students to listen in the class.
Yes, actually, it would affect. But sometimes kasi the lesson objectives would be, siguro kung titingnan mo, even you're doing the planning kasi, as I have said, you always start and consider your audience or your learners. So, if your objectives will be set that is not congruent to the abilities of your learners, then definitely it will affect their interest, their participation. But again, if you're planning that is in line with their abilities, with their skills, with their understanding, with their level of understanding, plus with, kasi di ba, when you're doing your objectives will be achieved by the activities that you have set. So if you plan and create your activities that is very well suited to the learners, then even the hardest of the topics would surely be appreciated by these learners. So nasa atin lang din yan kung paano natin ibibigay yung isang particular topic. I know you can relate to this kasi even if you have 5 teachers, each teacher would have a different take on how they will give their lessons. And you will see, makukompare mo talaga, may mga teachers na kaya nilang padaliin yung lesson at may mga teachers talaga na parang ang hirap-hirap. You know, I got to encounter one particular teacher. As I have said, I'm really very poor with mathematics, and when I had an advanced class when I was in college, I chose to take one math. Imagine, I challenged myself and I took a mathematics subject minor. So nag-math ako. So just imagine, and I was actually dreading that, but I wanted to really challenge myself. And you know, I got to meet this particular teacher who really made me feel that I was intelligent sa math. Parang ang daling answeran ng mga questions na ginagawa, binibigay niya sa akin. So, it's actually her magic, sabi ko na. She has become one of my favorite teachers. She has turned the concepts of mathematics something that's so puzzling to me, but with her, the way that she has actually crafted her objectives and the way that she would be giving out her activities, it made us see that mathematics subject is really just a breeze. That's the reason pala, pag ino-offer na yung subject niya, tapos, you know, nag-close agad yung subjects, na ubus talaga yung slot so pwede mag-enroll. So, napifill in lahat yung schedules niya agad-agad because she was that good. So, if we are able to do that, even the seemingly hard concepts would be simplified through your formulation of objectives that is based on your learners' needs and abilities, coupled with the activities that are also interesting to the students. I don't see any reason why there will be students who are not interested. However, reality speaking, meron lang din talagang mga students matitigas ang ulo. But let us not count them into that, no? Kasi inborn na sa kanila yon. Ang ating i-consider na lang talaga would be those students who are actually more challenged in learning rather than those who are having attitude problems. But you see, pag na-interest din ng mga estudyante will be challenged. Even katong pinakamaldito pag na-challenge na sila, you can see also the change in their attitude. I could recall one particular experience. Diba, as an English teacher, Sir Egg, it's so difficult to make male students right. Diba? Ang pasulatin. Usually, pinagagawa si classmate na lang. Mag-away pa sila, kay masuko and all. But I had this particular group, mga bugoy, dyan to sila kaayo. Dagan kayo bugoy ato. And I had this particular group, but I don't have any choice. I really have to make them kasi sa grade 10, kailangan talaga magsulat sila ng different types of outputs sa writing. So, merong definition, merong description, may mga ganon. So, ang hirap pa gawin. So, ang ginawa ko is that, paano ba to? So, I asked, actually, I started asking, ano dili man yun mo gusto magsulat? Sige daw, Vic. Istoryahin daw ko. So, most often, their comments would be, mag-listen daw sila. Mag-listen sila sa words, mag-listen sila. So, naman sila classmate na ako. So, sakay na lang daw sila dito. So, I will study them na. You will not learn it out. Okay, this is what we're going to do. So, what I did was to break down. So, I was going to ask them to write a description essay. I broke down that particular essay into smaller parts. So, ang introduction, nilagay ko lang talagang inisa-isa ko. Sa introduction, 2 sentences lang. Anong nakalagay sa sentence 1? Anong nakalagay sa sentence 2? The body, sulat ko din yon. Anong nakalagay? 4 sentences lang. Anong nakalagay sa sentence 1, sa sentence 2, 3, and 4? Conclusion, 2 sentences lang. Anong nakalagay sa 1 at sa number 2? Very structured, no, kung titingnan mo. But I guess if I provide a structure for them, they will not get confused kasi alam nila. So when I ask them to write, ganito na ang setting. Ito na yung scenario, classroom management. Okay, class. In-explain ko na yung gagawin. Now, since this is writing, I'm not very much strict into that. I will allow you to go out of the campus provided na hindi kayo lalabas ng gate. Pwede ka sa canteen, pwede kang kumain habang nagsusulat, walang problema. Basta make sure at the end of the period, isasubmit mo na yung activity. Okay. So you can go out or you can sit under the trees. Kung saan ka comfortable, you can go to the library. You can find where you would want to write. Ang iba, you have the option of sitting here sa front ko. Nandito lang ako sa classroom. So you can ask me questions. What happened was, katong mga pinakabugoy, ni gawas, naano sa akong katubangan for the whole hour. Because every time na naa sila word na dili nila masulti in English, pangutan ko, ihimo ko dictionary of thesaurus. So, maaari na siya nakita ko. So, whole hour yun ni ato. Question and answer, Mama, usang pag-English, ani ma, usang pag-English, ana. So, I just allowed them. Sige, pasagdan. So, hugon pa na ako sa nila. Maon na ni Ron, no? Dapat ako, naamoy ka ng dala na dictionary. Ha, ako na magpangutan ko ninyo. But anyways, I would give them the input. Within that hour, nakasubmit sila. I was quite happy with that. And I even added something. Knowing them, I'm already getting my interest. So, pwede silang gumawa ng output per work, provided that I will see that they are doing their work. So, it's like that. And I provide flexibility with the activity so that I could also find if they would really want that. So, that way, I was able to capture. So, kahit paano sa 4 yata na essay na kailangan nilang isulat, may na-submit sila. So, yun lang pala ang strategy. So, it's really a capture of how you think as a teacher, hold mo yan. Okay? That's part of your planning. But for the rest, I just gave them the parts. Binigay ko lang yung parts. I just suggested, I was not really very strict na 1-2, 1-2. So kung pwede lang dagdagan, okay lang. Pero I gave them the suggestion. Still the same, they can go out. But, I found that a very effective way of letting them run. So it's a matter of how you plan and how you integrate that. So to capture the interest, yun ang importante. Alamin mo at dapat kilala mo yung students mo. Okay? So that
Thank you so much, Ma'am Harry, for that answer. I also tried that one, Ma'am, creating a matrix for the essay writing. Kasi it would be easier for the students to construct their using a matrix rather than really give them the essay. I
Actually,
think, Ma'am,
it's difficult. It's difficult if you just give them something very broad.
Yes, Ma'am.
Diba? Sinabi mo, okay class, you write an essay. What's our topic, ma'am? Anything that you'd like to write about, mas dugay sila makastart to write because they are not given the mechanics and what to do.
Yes, ma'am, that's right, ma'am. All right. So I think also, ma'am, your statement just now also answered this question from Miss Dana. She asked about considering those students who are low achiever, so can we adjust our lesson plan to balance the discussion for the low and the high achiever learners daw po?
Yes. So
Yeah,
again, going back, just simply going back na, the way that you would give the mechanics of the activity and you just adjust it to their abilities would already be enough. So it does not necessarily mean that you have to change your activity. It's a matter of how you adjust it to their skills and to their abilities. It's like that. Okay. Somebody's asking, Sir Ed, if I'm going to give out the presentations, yes, I have providing a copy of the PowerPoint presentation for you. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, ma'am. So that's it, students. You can have a copy of this presentation. Thank you, ma'am, for that. And I think there are no questions po, ma'am, from the students.
Okay, so let's just proceed with the lesson planning process. Madali lang to. Only 15 slides, I promise you. Wala kayo, hindi kayo nakapag-break na. I'm sorry for that. Okay, so let's have the lesson planning process. Can you see on the screen now?
Yes, ma'am, we can see it now.
Okay, so process. Okay, before the actual delivery of a lesson, so the instructor must engage in the planning process. So during this time, they must determine the lesson topic. Okay, and of course, from the topic, they must derive the lesson objective or the desired results, the concept, the ideas, and all those things. So we have talked about that. Objectives are very critical. So everything in your lesson must be anchored on the objective. So they have the planning, the strategies that you will use, the activities, the materials, the resources. It is essential that it must be clear, it must describe the learning outcome. So I already talked about this, the SMART for the objectives. Okay? And they must describe the learner's behavior. Okay, now, the ABCDs of writing the objectives. Okay, so ABCD. What do you mean by this? A stands for audience. The audience is, of course, the learners for whom the objective is written. What grade, what abilities, is hetero, homo, or is it slow learners, fast learners? You must consider that. Second is the behavior. The verb that describes what the audience or the learners will want to do. Like describe, explain, locate, synthesize, argue. But argue is it's a very strong term. You can maybe find another term that would be more proactive, more communicating. And of course, the condition. The circumstances which the audience or the students will perform the behavior. What is the condition? So you will be talking about when the learner obtains a medicine, or you will be able to read the dosage, like that. Or within that particular time, within that particular, time back. Then, of course, the degree, acceptable performance of the behavior. how well will the learner perform the behavior. So these are the four considerations, the ABCD. So again, mauna-una audience or the learner, the behavior, their condition, and the degree. So now, what are the elements? Ito na. The elements of lesson planning, you start with the objective. All the objectives must have an aim, a purpose, or an objective. Okay, the instructor or the teacher must be very clear with what you want to happen. The pre-assessment. Pre-assessment is important because this is where you will determine whether your primary objective is appropriate. So what includes the pre-assessment? The level of skill and knowledge of you and of the learners that would determine the difficulty of the lesson. Yun yung tinatanong kanina, no? So, if you know your students na ganito, would you have to adjust? Yes. Kailangan mo i-adjust din. So, this would come in with your pre-assessment. So, you do not come to class simply just bringing your objectives with you. You have to have your own knowledge of what type of learners do you have. When you talk about pre-assessment, it's not simply a class. You know, when you're doing your lesson, hindi lang talaga siya isang klase. Remember, this is a group of people. Okay, a group of people who will have varied abilities. Iba-iba. Sa isang klase, meron siyang subgroups of individuals. May mga individuals na we have said, magaling sila kapag nakikita nila or namamanipulate nila. Or may mga individuals dito sa grupo na ito na magaling magsulat, magaling magsalita, magaling mag-drawing. So that should be part of your pre-assessment. Okay? Next, the motivation. The motivation is a psychological state within each student would want to learn what the instructor would want to teach. That's the reason that it's always included that we must have motivation in our class or a warm-up activity. Another element is your technique and sequencing. So specific planning is needed, diba? What we have said, your lesson plan must not be a laundry list of activities. So there must be a sequence or an arrangement. There should be a proper flow. If this activity is actually a very complicated activity, then you move to the one simpler on the next step. Para hindi naman masyadong nasasagad agad yung anak. Now, let's go back to motivation. If I will, aside from the motivation is the preparation of the learners, the motivation, another second source of motivation will be you as a teacher. You should have the enthusiasm to teach the lesson. Because if you have that enthusiasm, the motivation would also just flow. The authenticity of a teacher in teaching the lesson would be very apparent. And if the teacher is enthusiastic, the authenticity is very apparent, then the learners will have no reason not to be motivated with the lesson. Okay? So as I have said, the techniques and sequencing is very important. So kailangan may arrangement yung mga activities mo. And lastly, there must be that application, evaluation, and the follow-up, which are the concluding parts of the lesson plan, which would talk about the effectiveness of the lessons in the learning sequence. Okay, so the application, we already know, it is how they are able to put into the everyday activity the practicality of the concept that they have learned. Evaluation is for you to measure how much they have learned. And of course, the follow-up activities to cement or to fully arrange or properly solidify the concepts that they have learned. So these are just the elements that we have. So let's go to the design. Mag-design na tayo ng lesson plan. Ito yung kailangan mo. Una is the lesson information. Am I planning the right amount of activities for the time that I have? lesson too ambitious? Will the students be able to stay on the task? Okay. So you design each lesson considering the students' characteristics. Alam natin, pabalik-balik to. Then you also have your lesson topic. The lesson topic is very easy because it will come from the curriculum of the school or the district. Or in our case, it's from the national government. So the lesson topic is already given. Of course, benchmark and performance standards will talk about the objectives, what they need to achieve, and what are the things that they need to do. What is the outcomes? And na, students will be able to recognize the leaves of opinion aspect juniper trees or create a timeline of the 19th century New Mexico. These are the things that they have to do. And of course, the resources. Pabalik-balik lang to ha, because these are just the guidelines. With the students, of course, the environment sa management na tayo niyan. The lesson activities or instructional activities. So it's here, no? Introduction, lesson development, activities, and wrap up, which I will be showing you later. And of course, lastly, the teacher reflection. And I'm just making it fast kasi I want to go to the parts of a 4A lesson plan. Dito tayo mag-concentrate. I have here a sample. The lesson plan in PE grade 3 using the 4A's method. Bakit ito pinili ko na topic? Bakit wala sa math, sa science, social studies? Para fair, walang favoritism. And I selected grade 3 para medyo middle, intermediate, primary pala. Sa primary siya na level. Madali rin natin maintindihan. Okay. The objectives. This is the 4A's method in the DepEd map. At the end of the period, the pupils must have, these are the things that they have to do. 1. Identify the different body shapes and body actions used in sports. Number 2, demonstrated understanding of body shapes and body actions used in sports. Number 3, perform the different body shapes and body actions used in sports correctly. So let's go first the title. So if you see the title, it's really appropriate, no? Lesson plan in PE for grade 3. The objectives are actually SMART. Specific, measurable. Diba specific siya? Mag-identify sila, mag-demonstrate sila. Ang term na understanding there is actually quantified by demonstration. And then they will perform. Achievable within 1 hour. Okay? Then, of course, time-bound. Diba? All of those things. Pero what do we notice with this? Anybody? Ano yung napansin ninyo? What do you notice with the lesson plan?
Can I answer, ma'am?
Yes, Sir Ege.
Or the students could answer. Students, what have you
It's
observed?
okay. Anybody can answer. They can make a guess.
I think, ma'am, there's no affective domain in the objective book.
Yes, that's right. There is no affective domain. So wala siyang affective domain, no? So, sayang, kulang. Yes, they all started with the verb, that's right. And then, you will see, very different din ang kanyang format. Kasi, di ba, usually to identify, to demonstrate, to perform. But this is still accepted, okay? Now, again, wala rin siyang affective domain. So, maybe, what part siguro ang pwede nating ma-revise to make it an affective domain? Pwede siguro dagdagan na show appreciation, show understanding or appreciate the understanding of body shape and body actions used in sport through demonstration.
Yes,
Pwede,
ma'am.
no?
Measurable gapon siya, ma'am.
So it would be possible. So, yes. So, kumbaga, how do you how do you more on using your feelings, diba? Or show the importance of body actions, diba? So it's like that. Still, when you say show importance, it is still smart, specific, measurable, and all those things. Okay? So this is part of the objectives. The second one, okay, sorry ha, parang naka-part kasi dyan ang content standards included na. Why is it included in the content standards? Because this is the one that is found in the competencies in the book given by the DepEd. So content standards niya, learners demonstrates understanding of body shapes and body actions which are found in the objective number 2. So learners describes and performs body shapes and body actions properly. Again, the content standards and the learning competency, ibinibigay yan. Meron talagang libro for content standards and competency provided for the teachers. Okay. So this is part of the objective. Naka-specify siya. Okay. Next. Yun. Subject matter. Here. The topic is body awareness. Subtopics, body shapes, and body actions. Ang reference hindi inilagay, pero meron siyang mga modules or the book. You specify there what's the title of the book, who is the author, what page. And of course, the materials used, the pictures of different body shapes and body actions. Nakalagay dyan sa subject matter. Third part is the procedure. Ito na. Procedure includes the preliminary activities. Kung titingnan mo, wala siyang number. Kasi preliminary activities. So pag-organize, like the students get inside the classroom, then the prayer, introduce the teacher's names, and then warm up. Considering siguro to na bago yung teacher or newly met lang yung mga students. So this is your preliminary activities. Sometimes, part of the organization will be asking the students to arrange their seats and pick up pieces of papers. That's part of it. Minsan wala na to teachers' names. Okay. So that's part, still, just a part of the procedure ha. Okay. Ito na yung lesson proper. So this is where the 4A's come in. Kaya siya tinatawag na 4A's. So you're going to see there, the lesson proper activity, the first A. So this is a semi-detailed lesson plan. Semi-detailed lesson plan. What is the difference between a detailed and semi-detailed? Semi-detailed would just give the specific things that the teacher would like to do. A detailed lesson plan would really record or place there the responses of the learners. Pati yung mga yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes understood, nakalagay talaga doon sa detailed lesson plan. So, activity would be more on the first step, first part. Ano ang gagawin ng student in order for them to have the lesson? So, the activity can be your review. It can be, di ba, I have discussed earlier. So, may nakalagay doon, iba-ibang klase. So it can either be a review, pwedeng gawin mo ng review. Pwede mo siyang gawing brain activation. So pwede siya. So in this part, the teacher will group the pupils into 2 groups. Simple activity. He will give different pictures to the pupils. He will let them identify the body shapes and body actions by encircling the shapes that can be seen in the picture. So sa activity pa lang, you will see na na-hit na ni teacher ang kanyang objective na identify the different body shapes. So, titignan nyo, no? Sa first objective pa lang, sa activity pa lang, kung babalikan natin. Identify the different body shapes. So, sa activity pa lang, na-hit nyo na yung objective. Okay, second, analysis. So the teacher will gather the work of the pupils He will check if they encircle the right body shapes that can be seen in the picture. So that's an analysis. In some portions, in some parts, ilalagay niya doon yung mga answers nung kanyang students doon sa board, and he will be asking certain questions to point out. Ipapa-point out niya yung kanyang mga answers to see if they got it correctly or not. That's part of the analysis activity. So aside from the idea of asking, did you enjoy the lesson? Hindi siya although part lang siya ng analysis, but that's just temperature check. When saying analysis, you have to go deeper than the activity. Okay? So, this is the brain activation. Brain activation na siya na part. So, teacher will gather. As I have said, it can be a different way. Maybe the teacher can place the picture there, and then we will be discussing by asking the right questions for the students to really analyze their answers. Okay. Next, A is the abstraction. The abstraction, the teacher will demonstrate and he will discuss in front about body shapes and actions used in sports correctly. He will let the students observe. So, dito na pumapasok yung lecture method. Diba? Nag-lecture method na siya. Okay. Lastly will be the application. The teacher will give time. By the way, kung babalikan natin, sa abstraction na part, they will understand, okay, they will understand or demonstrate understanding of body shapes and body actions used in sport. Dito siya sa abstraction na achieve yung second objective. And the third objective, which is performing different shapes and body action to sports correctly, is found in application when the teacher will give the students time to practice. Pa-practicing niya. So this makes it the 4A's. Activity, analysis, abstraction, application. If you're going to look at it, the analysis will be related to the activity. Abstraction will be related to the analysis. Kasi bakit? Tingnan mo. After niya nag-encircle, after nila nag-discuss, si teacher na ngayon ang nag-demonstrate. So based on the analysis, when he asked questions to the students, then he came up with nagbigay na siya ng concept. Siya na nag-deliver ng concept. So it is still based on the analysis. And application is based on abstraction. After the lecture, the demonstration, and the understanding, he wanted to see if the students really understood. And for him to know that, they will apply what they have learned. So the teacher gave them time. Okay, so how is it evaluated? Again, dito pa rin tayo sa objective number 3. So this time, the teacher will let the pupils to perform. Okay, the different body shapes and body actions, and the teacher will evaluate it if they do it correctly. So in some lesson plans, they even put siguro rubrics or checklist. May mga ganon. Yun ang ginagamit nila. So the evaluation does not necessarily quiz lang talaga. So this way, it is performance. Performance-based siya. So ang application, kung titingnan natin, galing sa action, pinag-practice pa ang mga bata. At ang performance ay nandoon na sa evaluation part. That if you're going to see, suited ba siya para sa grade 3 learners? Tama lang ba siya sa grade 3 learners? Okay. So, Grace Manuelos said yes, of course, no. The simplicity of the activities and the way that the instructions were given, or the way that the plan is made, is that it's very simple and it's really appropriate for the learners, no, sa level ng learners. And then, of course, in the assignment, the teacher will tell the students to practice at home. So mag-practice pa rin sa home for using for their enhancement. Pwede rin yung dagdagan. Actually, they can further enhance by saying that kung ngayon nag-perform sila as a group, tomorrow there will be an individual performance. That will be part of the assignment. So if you will see, ang assignment is not reflected in the lesson plan. Wala siya. Kasi it will not happen within that hour. Diba? Kasi assignment na nga. So gagawin nila sa bahay. But this is what? A further enhancement of the evaluation. So aside na nagpa sila, bukas, meron pa ring additional activity. So what can you say? Is the teacher going to have a new lesson by the next day? What do you think? Will the teacher have a new lesson the next day? Yes or no? So si Grace is very active. So probably the teacher will be having a new lesson for the next day, knowing that the students were able to perform properly for their activity, or yes, that's true, no? That the teacher will now be setting a new lesson for the next day. So most probably, itong practice na ito na pagagawa niya would just be a part of the warm-up in order for them to move to the next topic. So if you're going to see, there's also another probable scenario. So it would still depend as well if the teacher will find that kailangan pa pala kasi naka-perform sila as a group but they were not able to master it individually. So there is also that possibility. But as I have said, it would be more on, kasi enhancement na lang. So meaning to say, it is actually really understood. But again, there might be an annotation with the lesson plan. But remember, this is just simply a plan. It's still not an application yet. So iba na yung usapan na na-implement na yung lesson. So with this, I will be closing the lecture. So that is all about the 4A's lesson plan. Diba? Kumbaga, masyadong short lang siya. That's why I gave you a very small, very simple example. Kasi gusto kong makita niyo yung entire scenario na a lesson plan does not necessarily have to be very complicated. You know, it doesn't have to be very complicated. What's very important is that it must be well planned. Okay? So, Sir Egg,
yes.
they might have other questions for me, although I know it's nearing lunchtime. So we still have about 5
Yes,
minutes. Okay pa sila?
Yes po, ma'am. We still have, I think, 6 minutes to go before 12.
Yes.
All right. So, students, do you have questions or clarifications from the discussion of Ma'am Mary about the 4A's? It's now the high time for you to raise your concerns, clarifications in terms of writing or planning your lesson plan, the activities, the analysis that you wanted, especially those who are having their lesson plans as detailed lesson plans, the detailed, the semi-detailed lesson plans. Questions from the BSED English, from the BSED Social Studies. Sarin, do you have question? Do you have a question from the BEd students?
Yes.
Earlier, our BEd students had plenty of questions about lesson planning.
I think somebody's raising her hand. Yana? Or baka napindot lang?
I'm not sure, ma'am. I've not seen. Siguro napindot lang po siguro, ma'am.
Napindot lang, yeah.
Yes po, ma'am. Alright, so students, from the BSN, yes, ma'am, we have here a student raising her hand.
Okay.
Pero ni-lower agad. I was not able to get the name. Yes po. You are recognized. You can open your microphone to state your question. Baka napindot lang rin po. We have one question po, ma'am, coming from Miss Destriza. Sorry, it's a comment rather. Thank you so much, ma'am, for the tips you shared. Those were very useful in lesson planning. Highly appreciated. Po.
Okay. Thank you so much for the appreciation.
Nan po, ma'am.
Actually, it's a refresher for the BSN English 4 because mana sila sir ang ipakaon dyan na kung maayon sa lesson planning. Isa-isahon dyan ang presentation sa ilahang LPs. Yes.
Nag-isa na og maayo, ma'am. Alright.
Yes.
We have here one student po, ma'am, raising her hand. We have Miharis Agnes. Yes, go ahead. You are recognized. Miss Agnes Miharis, you are recognized. You can open your microphone now.
Good morning, ma'am.
Hello, good morning. Yes.
My question to ma'am is, are we obliged to follow the 7 E's format po?
7 E's? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
This is what I've been saying, no? Kasi for the Department of Education, they're encouraged to use the 4 A's. But as of this time, there's one particular subject area wherein the teachers are asked to write in 7 E's. That's the science subject areas. Now, rather science subject area. So, sila required sila. They are actually encouraged. If you're going to say the term required, it would really be depending on your administrator. So on your part right now, it would depend on your teacher. Diba? Kasi kanya-kanya yan eh. It's how we do the curriculum development in the school. So if the administrator or the school principal would actually require you to do the 7 E's or the 5 A's or the 3 I's or the 4 A's, then I guess you really have to follow. But if your administrator will not be giving you the exact format, our go-to format would always be the 4 A's of the 4 A's that was being shown. As I have said, no, pinapractice din kasi yan ngayon. And I do not know later on, I do not know in the future, there's a possibility that we will be adapting that 7 E's. Actually, nag-start na yan noon. Tapos it was slowly working its way. Kaya na nag-pandemic, tapos pinasukan ng DLP, ng DLL, and so on. So, maraming developments. It's just, but I would advise you na, as of this time, if you're asked by your teachers to write in 7 E's, then why don't you do that? Because it will be a very good practice. Mas maganda nga kung na-practicean mo lahat ng klase ng development. Kasi actually, pare-parehas lang man sila. It's only a matter of grouping and, trying to break them down into a more separate or easier pieces to come up with. Ang beauty lang kasi ng 5E, 7Es, mas marami kang activities na nagagawa. Kapag sa 3Is, napakadali lang kasi doon mo na-hit agad yung tatlong objectives mo. Sa 4As din, ganun din. So, as I have said, if you will be required by your teacher or your teacher administrator as to what format that your lesson plan must make, then you are obliged to do so. But if you are not, then our go-to format would be the 4As lesson plan.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you po.
Okay, thank you so much for the question.
All right, thank you so
There
much.
is a question.
Yes po, ma'am. We have another question here from Ms. Lunggakit. She's asking about the evaluation. What is the appropriate or parang appropriate type or format of evaluation to be used? Is it subjective or the summative assessment po, ma'am?
Actually, if we're going to talk about summative, that is actually your long test. Diba? That's your periodical exam. Ang summative test. So maybe you're talking about the not the diagnosis, but the formative exam. Formative is the objective type. So when you're using evaluation, remember that you are rating your learners. Pag evaluation na, iba yung assessment, iba yung evaluation ha. When you do assessment, you are actually trying to measure how much your learners have learned, and that would dictate whether they are ready for an evaluation for them to be graded. Tapos, when you say evaluation, that's immediately grading. So, it would actually depend on your type of the topic that you have. Kasi pwede kang maging subjective, especially if you're measuring the performance. You can also be objective if you're measuring the output. What do I mean by that? Let's say, for example, let's say, for example, in a performance presentation of the learner, meron kayong poetry interpretation. So, poetry interpretation. You can use a subjective evaluation if you're going to ask the peers or classmates nila to give an evaluation of the performance of the learner. Okay? So, pwede yun siyang subjective. Pwede rin siyang maging objective in a way that you can use a rubric. Pwede kang gumamit ng rubric to measure or to judge or to rate their performance. So as I have said, it will be up to you on what type of evaluation material will you be using. Kasi depende yan doon din sa objective. Remember that the objective will also dictate what material will be used for evaluation and assessment. Yun nga lang, ang summative is more on end of the quarter or end of the lesson or end of the unit assessment. So that takes a longer time. And summative assessment would always be objective. It would be objective. So if I were you, kapag if we're talking about daily lessons, hindi pa siya nag-i-end sa unit, then you can just simply make use of the formative test. Or again, pwede siya subjective or objective, depende sa activity na ipapa-perform mo. Tapos, after the unit, then you can also come up with your summative assessment or a long test to see how well they were able to grasp the knowledge or the concept. Kasi minsan, di ba, yung mga learners natin, natatandaan lang nila yung learning ngayon at bukas. Pagka next, para silang merong short-term memory. Hindi rin natin sila mabablame kasi ang dami-dami ding information na pumapasok sa kanila. Just imagine, ang isang lesson, 8 kabuok na subjects, tapos may 1 lesson per day, ang dami-daming concepts na pumapasok na. So we cannot really blame them if they really absorb everything. But the summative assessment will give us the signal whether they actually retained or mastered the concepts and the skills that we have presented to them. No, so that would already give us the idea na okay talaga kasi nakuha talaga nila yung unit na ito, na nakamaster pala sila dito sa concept na gusto namin ipamaster sa kanila. Okay? So, again, the evaluation part, it would have to rely also on the objectives. So, makakagawa ka lang ng evaluation, makakapili ka ng proper tool for evaluation based on the objectives that you will write. So, kapag yun na, madidictate niya na kung anong pwede mong appropriate tool na pwedeng gamitin. So, okay?
Thank you po, ma'am. Certainly na-answer
Thank
ang
you so
question po.
much.
Nag-doubt ko sa evaluation, ma'am.
It's okay. It's actually most neglected part ng evaluation at assessment. Kaya yun, we have to go back. Always just go back to your objective para mas madali mong magawa yung assessment na part. Again, there are different tools. I don't know with your series, sir, baka pwede nyo i-include ang evaluation and assessment because that's another part eh. Iba yung strategies, iba yung IMs, iba yung lesson planning in itself. Iba talaga yung tools na gagamitin mo for evaluation. Actually, it's a very, very good question kasi it's confusing. Ano bang gagamitin ko? Mag-pen and paper pa ako or magpapaperman pa ako? Yun. Dapat nila alam din yun so that they can really come up with a very good lesson plan.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you po, ma'am. I think it's noted by the Sir Benj
Yes,
and
Sir Benj
Sir
is
Ella.
listening.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, that's the next topic, ma'am. Next week, it's all about assessment.
Yes, that's good. The assessment tools. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much, Ma'am Harry, and thank you so much, Sir Benj. Are there any other questions coming from the students? Do you have questions, students? How about on the analysis part, on the abstraction?
Yeah. Nahihirapan sila sa analysis actually.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, the common practice is on the analysis part is that students would usually ask, how do you find the activity? What do you think is our topic for today? Which is very wrong.
It's not enough. It's not actually enough. That's just an introduction. Introduction pa lang yan. Kasi when that's actually aside sa taking the temperature based from the activity. So if you will find already that if your learner is having a problem in terms of that, then I guess you can go deeper to your activity by doing the analysis. So when you're doing the analysis, you actually analyze the activity, the outputs in the activity. Diba? Kung halimbawa, kung babalikan ko na you will ask the students to form sentences doon sa activity, doon ka na mag-ask ng questions to let them identify. Let's say, for example, your topic is verb phrase. So you will ask them the questions that would lead them in the analysis. Okay, so on the first sentence, what is the action word there? Diba? So, diba pina-analyze mo sa kanila? So you write it down on the board. Second sentence, third sentence. So let's go back to the first sentence. Isa lang ba yung action word? Balikan mo. Ay, hindi pala. Parang may kulang. O sige, idagdag mo nga yung kulang doon. It's like that. So that's actually, get the concept out from them. Kumbaga, your analysis, sa analysis pa in layman's term, gipuga na nimo sila dito pa lang sa analysis to get for them to be led to the concept. Kasi nung unang time, di ba, kapag nag-activity ka, pagkatapos ng diretso, okay class, our lesson for today, wala siyang leading doon sa abstraction. So the analysis should lead that to the abstraction. So ang students ang dapat mukuha sa concept before ihatag ni teacher. That's why I said the activity is, rather analysis is anchored on activity, abstraction is anchored on analysis, and application is anchored on abstraction.
All right, thank you so much, ma'am, for that. I would like also to clarify, ma'am, because before when we had our demonstration, it had become parang a huge argument among us classmates kasi analysis would prepare the concept for abstraction. So we argued if is it necessary to post the learning objectives before the start of the discussion. Kasi the danger will also, the danger is also is that the students will have already the idea. Parang it will be difficult for the teacher to process the analysis kasi nandun na sa objective yung answer po.
Actually, sir, when we post the objective, you're already giving them the goals that you have to achieve for that day. Diba? You're setting the goal.
Yes, ma'am.
So in when you're doing, I think if we're going to think about it, it does not necessarily mean na kumbaga it would already give the students the idea of what is the topic all about, because in the first place you're still going to dig deeper into their knowledge. Mas maganda rin naman yun kasi even if they already have that particular idea, if they can already think about what they know. Diba? Nakakapag-prepare din sila and they can add more to the discussion. So for you, as a teacher, although parang, kasi ang gusto ng iba, may element of surprise. Diba? Nasisira
Yes, ma'am, exactly.
Kumbaga, alam na natin yung ending, alam natin
Yes,
yung next step. Pero actually, diba, the purpose of having our lessons is connecting what our students previously learned from the past lessons and building up to a new concept. So, for me, posting the objective on the board is more advantageous in a way that, again, you're given the guide, you're given the direction, and at the same time, when the students are already given the clues, they can also already recall. Step na yun para ma-recall nila, and when they have their knowledge, previous knowledge, kung meron man sila noon, di ba nakaka-add sa discussion? So siguro ang element of surprise na lang na may iwanan is that may concept ka na pero wala pa rin silang alam. So doon na lang ikaw mag-dwell sa element of surprise. But it pays well to have a very fruitful discussion, a progressive discussion, a very interesting talk if your learners have something to add. Mas maganda talaga na nakakapag-add ang learners kasi di ba, sometimes there are concepts that we also do not know and we learn from our students. So it makes a very interesting lesson if we give them that. So kung sa akin lang, I would really prefer that objectives will be stated. Doon na, secondary na lang yung element of surprise. Doon ako mag-surprise sa mga activities sa kanila para mas masaya. Okay?
Alright. Thank you so much, ma'am, for that clarification. Alright. Ma'am, we still have one question here.
Yes.
Are we going to cater this one? Yes. Wala. Alright. From De Los Reyes, they were parang oriented po, ma'am, that the objective A and B must be achieved in the application part, and the objective C or the affective domain should be achieved in the evaluation part. Is it necessary ba daw, ma'am, to have this kind of parang format?
Okay. Actually, I can equate that to the story that I shared with you earlier with my students na sinulat ko talaga yung lesson, sentence 1, ano nakalagay, sentence 2, ano nakalagay. I will really appreciate the effort of your teacher that she has given you the formula. No? That is for your mastery. I really appreciate that na binigyan kayo ng formula para ma-master nyo kung saan nyo ilalagay. But later on siguro, as you grow, as you progress, and as you develop your lesson plan writing skills, then you can interchange. Pero kung hindi pa kaya, then you stick to that. As I have said, magandang formula yan na ibinigay sa inyo. It's one way that you can really master the writing of the lesson plan. And then, again, later on, kung pwede na, kung kaya na niyo, then you can interchange them. Pero actually, sa mga books na makikita natin, always talaga yung, di ba, cognitive, psychomotor, and affective na arrangement. But I have not read any books naman din na nakalagay talagang ganun talagang arrangement at ganun talaga dapat ang paggagamit sa lesson plan. And everything is not cut out and dry. So it could really be depending on the designer of the lesson plan, who is the teacher. But as I've said, I salute your teacher for doing that. Talagang it's a very good step to teach. I will also put that in my mind and come up with that style. I will try to adapt that as well. No? Kasi it really helps. Kanang lessen ang confusion nila kapag nakaset talaga kung saan mo muna ilalagay, yung dapat mong ilagay. So alam mo na when you're making that, doon ko ibabase yung dapat mong gawin. Okay? Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Very matik po siya, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Alright. Ma'am, we have here one clarification from Miss Visto.
Yes.
She is asking about the difference between daily lesson plan, DLP, and the daily lesson log. Is it the same na, ma'am, or is it different?
The parts are different. Format yun eh. The lesson plan has a different format from the DLL. Okay? So the lesson log, as I have said, the DLP is asked for the teachers who will be making that on their first 3 years of teaching or first 2 years of teaching. And the DLL will be for those teachers who have stayed in the institution or have been teaching for more than 3 years. So ang content niyan ay magkakaiba. So iba yung nakalagay sa format. But be assured that for the lesson log and the lesson plan, kapag sa DepEd, meron kayo makuha talagang format na ibinibigay sa inyo. Again, depending on the administrator. Pero sa lesson log kasi, na-cut na siya lahat na nakalagay na kung anong kailangan mong gawin. Even to the last portion na with your reflection, nakalagay talaga the mastery of the learners and all. You will find that there. So, again, there's that very big difference. The DLP and the DLL. Sa content pa lang or ano yung nakalagay sa mga terms, ano yung nakalagay, makikita nyo. Okay, so DLL din, actually it's done weekly. Nakikita talaga siyang weekly upload of prepare, pero daily lesson lang siya. And some of the administrators would only even ask you to identify the page, like kung anong page ito, anong page yan, anong page na. Yung ibang administrators, ganun ang pinagagawa. So, again, it would depend on the administrator. So, when it comes to format, there's a difference between the two. And again, as I have said with the use, DLP for the new teachers, DLL for those who have stayed in the institution or in DepEd for a long time.
Alright, thank you so much, ma'am, for that clarification. Who else would like? Thank you. Who else would like to raise their questions or clarification? Meron pa po ba? Students? How about you, Ma'am Harry? Do you have questions
I run out of
for the
questions.
students?
No, I just would like to give an advice to the learners. I know na, iba nasa sunburn na. I know that writing the lesson plan is a very challenging task for the students and for the incoming teachers. Right? It's so difficult to love that particular task. Ang dami-dami talaga nagiging pag nag-lesson planning na. But I would just really advise you to appreciate it more than hate it, because in the long run, it gives you the direction, it gives you the record that you need, the documentation that you need for you to go back to your lessons. And if you challenge yourself, ako sa totoo lang, sir, it's a challenge kasi pagdating ng mga, pag January na, February na, hirap na magsulat ng lesson plan kasi masyado ng maraming activities, ako'y nakaayo. But I really have to cope up with that. Why? Because I realized the value of it. Kasi pagkatapos at the end of the school year, I would be making my use of my old lesson plans, and I can use that as reference for my next lessons or for my next classes. So by the time that I have already gathered a lot of my lesson plans, na-gather ko na, na-collect ko na, ang dali madali din lang isulat kasi parang, ito yung ginamit ko before, which is more interesting for the learners rather than the one that I employed last year. So it's really like that. It's a very good reference, point of reference for me. So rather than hating it, as I have said, you just enjoy it. You just enjoy doing your lesson plan. But if you're getting tired of that, then again, I suggest you take a break. Enjoy first. Kasi pag hindi ka nag-take a break, talagang magre-reflect yan. At saan naman talagang writing, magre-reflect talaga yan. Yung feelings mo, yung emotions mo, kung ano yung pinagdadaanan mo during that time when you forced yourself to write that. Okay? So it's just that. Very simple. It's a tall order, but it could be simple. Just enjoy. And accept mistakes. Ito pala, before I forget. Marami akong students na ayaw magpa-check ng lesson plan kasi takot na makita yung mali. Do not be afraid of your mistakes because your mistakes would always be a part of learning. You share it with co-teachers, you share it with your classmates so that they can give also their point of view for you to improve what you are writing. Ganun yun. That's actually one of the last parts of the lesson planning. After your reflection, you also ask for feedback, and who can give better feedback would be your cooperating teacher or your schoolmates or your classmates who knows what you are talking about and who knows what you are going through. Yung iba, pag lesson plan na itatago agad, ayaw ipakita. Pag nagpa-practice teach na, pag magde-demo, ayaw ipakita na mo, wag ganun. Kasi mas maganda yung na-correctionan na agad. So pag-implement mo, smooth sailing na. Agad-agad na siya wala ka na problema ng iisipin. So do not be afraid of corrections. Always just think of, it should be constructive. That's a room for you to improve yourself. So do not be afraid of that. Okay?
Thank you so much, Ma'am Harry, for that sound advice to all our students. I think we do not have any more questions. Thank you so much, Ma'am Harry, for your very insightful talk
Thank you also.
with regards to lesson planning. Can we now show our certificate of appreciation to Ma'am Harry? Alright. We've learned a lot today, no? Even ako, extended din ang lesson ni Ma'am Harry when it comes to lesson planning. So, we have here in our certificate of recognition. Let me read this certificate. Moncayo College of Arts, Sciences, and Technology, El Sarmiento Senior Street, Poblacion, Moncayo Davao de Oro. Certificate of recognition is presented to Ms. Christian and Hara L. Martesio in grateful appreciation and recognition of her lofty thoughts, brilliant ideas, and relevant experiences as resource speaker during the webinar series 4 entitled What Makes a Great Lesson Plan, held on October 29, 2021 at Moncayo College of Arts, Sciences, and Technology via Zoom and Facebook Live platforms. Given this 29th day of October 2021 via Zoom and Facebook Live platforms, signed Dr. Karen Chaser Makiling, PhD, Academic Program Head of the Teacher Education, who is currently now in the meeting room, and signed Dr. Gary P. Legachera, EDD, our college administrator. Again, certificate of recognition is presented to Ms. Christian and Hara L. Martesio, Principal 1 of the Moncayo National High School. A virtual applause, please, for Ma'am Harry. Thank you so much, Ma'am Harry. Ayan. Instant agad ang certificate. Naka-frame na. Thank you, Ma'am Harry, for all your, again, insights and for sharing your brilliant ideas with us.
Thank you so much, sir. I actually really enjoyed the discussion today. I can see that our students are very much appreciative. It's really very heartening. Thank you so much for listening. I know it's not really very easy. Boring talaga, Jud, ang 4 hours of the talk. But nagtsaga talaga kayong makinig. So I do hope that in a way, I was able to give you a little bit of learning that I have shared based from what I have learned also and from my experiences. And that I'm really looking forward to meeting everybody. For those who will be doing the secondary education practice teaching, I'm looking forward to seeing you here in the campus. So I really want to meet everybody. No? Kung pwede lang. If allowed na talaga tayo. So you're all welcome. Thank you so much for this very great experience.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We look forward also. We hope that our students could really have their physical OJT with the Mugaya National High School. Yeah, it's really true. No, lesson planning is really one of the dreaded na part of OJT along with the TOS and the TQ. All right. At this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, we will have a special announcement from our academic program head, Dr. Karen Chaser Makiling. Yes po, Doc.
Hi, good noon, everyone. Hello.
Good noon po, Doc. Yes, Doc, we can hear you.
Yeah. Hi, Ma'am Harry. Thank you so much for your time. Ano pa si Ma'am Harry?
Yes, Doc.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ay.
Thank you.
po. Thank you po. We hope to invite you again next time around po, Ma'am. And hopefully po, because we are going to conduct some another webinar series for the faculty. Hopefully po, Ma'am, magkuan gihapon ta, Ma'am, mag-collaborate.
Yes. My
Thank you po,
pleasure
Ma'am.
to be invited.
Thank you po, Ma'am. Okay, for the fourth year students, nakuha na namin yung initial na number of vaccinated students. We have for the BEd 4A. We do encourage you to please. Let me just check for a while. Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, we would like to encourage everyone to get vaccinated in order for you to be protected and be prepared, hopefully, for this upcoming practicum sa second semester, and as well as for your limited face-to-face na let review, and as well as for your graduation ceremony. So hopefully, because nag-post na kami doon sa group page natin, and then kindly check because I can see here that BEd 4A is nang vaccinated. We please, if you can, please get vaccinated. Okay? And ano pa ba dito? We have for the BEd 4B, 68% na tayo. For the BSEd 4A, 63%. And then for the mathematics, we have 60%. And SS 4A, 55%. And the highest it's from fourth year BSEd SS 4B. It's 81%. So please get vaccinated. So yun lang, and we are actually closely monitoring the number of the students who are participating or getting vaccinated. Kasi this is not just for us, but this is basically for you. Okay? So yun lang, and I have to go because I still have another webinar in the Region 11. So thank you so much everyone for joining us today, and I'll see you again next week. Bye and take care. Thank you, Sir Egg, and
Thank you,
Sir
ma'am.
Benji, and Sir Arab. Thank you
Yes,
so much.
po. Thank you, Doc. Sorry, Doc. Ngayon ko lang po na-read yung message mo, Doc. Sorry. Thank you so
okay.
much. Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, po, Doc.
bye-bye. Thank you.
Yes, Doc. Thank you so much for that announcement. So, again, I encourage everyone to get vaccinated na and do your part. And, of course, um, in helping to end this crisis we are going through right now. All right, so to end our webinar this morning, I would like to request Miss Sarin to give her a closing message. A virtual applause, please.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. In behalf of all the education students, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our speaker, Ms. Christian Anhara L. Martesio, sharing such knowledge about what makes a great lesson plan. Well, from the lesson planning on what are the key components of it, the ABCDs, the elements, the design, and the parts of the 4A lesson plan. And of course, those on what to consider, more so with the qualities and strategies in making an effective one, how to deal with the hurdles of making one, and most importantly, the essence of lesson plan. Certainly, this topic is very pivotal since being the future educators that are, lesson plans serve as the blueprint indeed to make the teaching learning setting designed as meaningful and productive as pinnacle. And we are very much blessed to have know all of this, especially coming from our speaker, who is known to be one of the greatest among the greats. I know how effective Ma'am Anhara is. I've been mentored by her and Ma'am Melody in the years. When I was still studying in Kai National High School, I really learned a lot, even from then up to this day. So I am really confident that we are in good hands in this meaningful and learnable webinar series. So yeah, I hope that we can apply everything that we have learned today in our future chosen fields. Of course, I would like to acknowledge the few amazing souls who raised us into this pedestal of learning and that I know would be very much happy to see us win in this journey of creating lifelong learners. Our advisors, Sir Benji Doydoy and Sir Arap L. Ordaneza, the Program Head of Education, Dr. Karen Chaser Makiling, and our newly appointed College President, Dr. Gary Pila Gachera. Before I put a dot mark on this message, I would also like to thank the very commendable Master of Ceremony of all times, like literally, Sir Egdils Reyes, and of course you, my fellow future educators. It is my deep pleasure to be among such accomplished and great individuals in this very significant scholarly endeavor, the webinar series. I know we are all craving for more learnings, but we still need to satisfy our hunger first for food. So I love and I'm looking forward to the upcoming series with you all. Stay safe and God bless everyone.
Thank you so much, May J. Sarin, for that very profound message. All right, thank you so much. Yeah, before we end this webinar, we will have very quick na lang na pictorial for documentary purposes. So I would like to request our technical team to do the pictorial. We are already late from our target schedule. All right, Mr. Rafael,
Page 1, sir.
please. Sorry.
1, 2, 3. Page 5, Nico, sir.
All right.
Page 2.
Next.
1, 2, 3. Page 3. 4. Last. Okay na, sir.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us in attendance.
Thank you so much,
Will be
everyone.
posted in respective GCs. Thank you so much, Ma'am Hari, for, of course, again, sharing your expertise and brilliant ideas with us. Thank you, students, for joining us and for your active participation. I hope you learned something.